museum is really coming along.
There.
Anybody will ever get to see it, but
Judy Ringo, you are sharing your screen, so if you could unshare, that would be helpful.
Mute yourself. So now I can see you. Please. Oh, hey, Roger. Hey, Roger. But like, you mute yourself.
And epic views. Ideal for a memorable weekend getaway or spur of the moment staycation. Find special offers, which include a Bellevue Collection gift card exclusively at BellevueCollection.com/getaway. The perfect drive-in getaway is right here, right now.
Actually collecting benefits. I'm not seeing any hands. What about COVID-19 and your rights? Can the government legally force you to wear a face mask? Probably. And what's up with those mysterious planes looking down on you? Is there any doubt in your mind who this plane belongs to? Not at all. No. Got a lot you want to answer. So call me.
Damian Lillard has two big reasons to celebrate. Twins on the way. Good girl. Congratulations to officially wrapped up. We're still counting up all of your donations, but so far we have collected more than 2,000 pieces of technology and enough school supplies to help more than 22,000 students.
But he's got their sound.
I tell Kate? I'm going to. I just say that generally speaking. Yeah. Just as a note before we get started, unmuted. Just as a note before we get started, if you are unmuting yourself and interrupting or talking over the top of people, I will be having to mute you so that we can clearly understand everyone. If it's a issue, then we'll just have to remove you to a waiting room. Thank you.
Reminded me of my mother right there. We'll just have to remove you.
Well, then your mother said things nicer than what my mother said.
She was very polite.
Well, when it came to her children, polite went out the window.
I know.
Okay.
We might have to start looking at that.
5:30.
Oh, it's time. Unmuted.
Ma'am, you guys ready to roll?
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm going to be calling this meeting to order. This is the special city council meeting of August 31st, 2020. And I would now ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Darcy Long Curtis.
Here.
Timothy McLaughlin.
Present.
Scott Randall.
Here.
Rod Runyon.
Here.
Linda Miller.
Here.
Mayor Mays.
Here. I would now like to ask Counselor Linda Miller to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You'll all join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Now is the time specified for the continued public hearing on appeal, APL-031-20, regarding the Plan Commission's decision to approve subdivision SUB 74-19. As before, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the hearing procedures for tonight's continued quasi-judicial hearing remain amended. On June 26, 2020, the Oregon Legislature enacted House Bill 4212, which authorizes the city to hold virtual public meetings so it can continue to provide essential services and make decisions in a public and transparent manner while preventing the spread of COVID-19 and protecting public health. Consistent with House Bill 4212, the city has implemented the following procedures for tonight's meeting. This meeting is accessible to the public via Zoom, and access instructions have been provided to the public and posted to the city's website. All written testimony that has been received since August 24th has been posted to the city's website for public viewing and has also been transmitted to the city council, so the testimony can be considered in a timely manner. At this point, I would like to reintroduce some people. First, the city council from left to right. On my immediate right, on the left side of your screen is Linda Miller. To my immediate left, Rod Runyon, Scott Randall, Darcy Long Curtis, and Tim McLaughlin. I'd also like to introduce at this time the city's attorney, Spencer Parsons, who's with Beery, Elsner, and Hammond, and I believe he's waving his hand as we speak. I expect that the city council and I may be requesting some advice and counsel from Mr. Parsons during this hearing. I'd also like to introduce the city staff. I know Director of Community Development, Steve Harris, is with us, the interim Director of Community Development, Alice Cannon, and also the main speaker on behalf of the staff tonight is Josh Chandler, an associate planner with the City of the Dalles. Also on behalf of the applicant, Jamie Housley of Jordan and Ramus of Vancouver is with us, I believe.
Yes. Hi, guys.
There he is. Welcome, Mr. Housley. And also representing the appellant, Mr. Steve Marash of Landerholm, also in Vancouver. Mr. Marash, I know is here, right?
Yes, that's correct.
There he is. Thank you. Also, the developer is here, Mr. Cameron Curtis. I noticed he was here. I would also like to make sure he is recognized. The procedures for providing live testimony at tonight's continued hearing, as before, are as follows. You must be recognized by me before testifying. Participants in tonight's hearing are currently muted and will be unmuted when called on by me. If you have logged into this meeting from your computer and you would like to testify, please raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I will call on you either by your name or whatever designation appears on your Zoom screen. City staff will assist me throughout this process. If you are calling in from your home or cell phone, please wait until we have called on everyone that has logged in from their computers. Those who have joined using their phones will be asked if they wish to speak next. We ask everyone to be respectful, limit background noise, and not talk over each other. You must state your name and address before speaking, and please speak slowly. You'll be given up to 5 minutes to state your testimony, and I will attempt to let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining in that 5 minutes. I will reopen the continued hearing by first recognizing the city staff in order to introduce new materials that we have received since the August 24th meeting and discuss materials prepared by our staff for the continued hearing. I will then ask if the applicant and the appellant and anyone from the public would like to testify. The city council may ask questions of the staff and the applicant during the hearing. During this portion of the meeting, both the applicant and the appellant will be given up to 5 minutes to respond or to give testimony. During the continued hearing, some important standards apply. First, the city council decision remains limited to the approval criteria that are listed in the staff report. For that reason, your testimony must address those criteria or other criteria you believe might apply and explain why you believe the criteria are or are not met. Evidence and testimony that does not relate to the approval criteria cannot be considered by the city council. Second, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city council and other parties an opportunity to respond to that issue prohibits an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Now, before we get started again, do any members of the city council have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, or bias since the August 24th meeting that you need to disclose? If you do, please raise your hand.
Raise my hand.
Counselor Miller.
I have had conversation. I contacted 3 different truck drivers regarding the intersection of Fremont, 197 and Columbia View Drive.
Thank you. Counselor Runyon.
Actually, today, just to be clear here, Counselor McLaughlin called me about 2 hours before the meeting. He asked about the process. I replied, listening to those who wish to speak. And I assumed that most of those would be the ones who wrote letters, would be the speakers. That was just my assumption. And 2, he asked if, what I believe, if I say this correctly, I believe was what exactly are we approving or not approving? And I said, we are approving or not approving the appeal. That's it. And the third question was, Mr. Marash, is he a city attorney or the appellant's attorney? I said, he's the appellant's attorney. And I said, that's the end of our call. And we hung up.
Thank you. Counselor Randall.
Yes, yesterday I had a brief discussion with Timothy Sipe, who resides near the proposed development, and he dialed in last week and had to sign off early, so he didn't hear the entire hearing. So I explained what took place and that we'd be continuing the hearing tonight, and that was the extent of our discussion.
Thank you. Counselor Lon Curtis.
Several times in the last week, it's come up as not an issue about specifics, but people wanting to acknowledge or asking if we'd receive emails that they sent, and I explained that that was ex parte communication and didn't proceed past that.
Thank you. Counselor McLaughlin.
Other than the conversation with Counselor Runyon, which was, I was calling to see how he was feeling, and that led into the next questions, which were accurate. So that's the only contact I've had.
I myself have had several conversations with the city council during this process, and all the conversations have had nothing to do with the substance of the subdivision or the substance of the issue. They've been conversations regarding the process and the order of things on the agenda.
True.
Okay. Does anyone participating in tonight's continued hearing wish to challenge the qualifications of any members of the city council? Hearing nothing. Do the councilors have any questions? With that, I will now open the public hearing. The first order will be to hear the staff presentation, and then we will hear from the applicant, who will have 5 minutes. And then if the appellant would like to respond to whatever the applicant says, he will also be given 5 minutes. It's important to understand, though, that the applicant, no matter what happens, whether we go back and forth or not, the applicant would have the last word. And with that, I will now turn it over. I take it to Josh Chandler to give the staff report. Is that right?
Yeah, you got my name right. Is that what you were asking?
What do you say?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Chandler, I did.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Real quick, I was wondering if we could possibly do a mic check for Councilor McLaughlin. I was unable to hear anything he just
Mic
said.
check, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just provide a brief, just kind of an update. We sent out 3 separate little bit of additional information that was received since last meeting. There's 3 different memos that we've attached to the city's website. They were distributed. One of them was pretty much, we received a letter from the appellant's attorney, and he was providing some additional information regarding some questions that were asked of him regarding the trip counts. So he provided that information, included it in an email. That was memo dated August 26th. There was a memo dated August 28th, which was information regarding the ODOT ARTS program for improvements at US 197 and Fremont Street. This was requested by the applicant's attorney. There was also information included in that packet regarding an ODOT CARES program. This was brought up by the appellant's attorney. Staff, just for some clarification, staff did not mention the CARES program. I believe there was some confusion there. So we just provided the email correspondence. It was actually, I think the reference was to the ODOT ARTS program. It's also included. Any additional information regarding these memos, I will have City Council direct those questions toward the applicant or the appellant. And then a memo that came out today, which included some emails that were received, some comments that were received from some residents. There was some additional email correspondence from the appellant's attorney, as well as a letter from the applicant's attorney that was provided this afternoon. In addition to that, staff has provided that we will be requiring one additional condition of approval to this application. It'll be condition of approval number 27, which prior to the city approval of the final plat, the applicant shall receive city council approval to annex the subject property into the boundaries of the city. We essentially provided this as some clarification. The property, the previous property owner actually, as far as with a minor partition to break these 2 lots up where the single family home is, as well as the large parcel that's being discussed, they actually signed a consent to annex at that time. But that was essentially an undetermined date for city council to decide when that annex would happen. So just as an efficiency measure at this time, we would require that, before the subdivision the final plat is signed, if approved, they would be required to annex into the city. And that's about it. I am more than happy to take any additional questions though.
Anybody on the city council have any questions for Mr. Chandler?
No.
No.
I have,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Councilor Miller.
is there a maximum number of units per acre?
Yeah, it's 25 for that zone.
25 units per acre.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, is there a minimum?
Yeah, it's seven with the city. It's 7 in the municipal code, 10 in the comprehensive plan.
Okay, if I were to buy a lot, could I put a single family dwelling on it?
This lot,
On a lot?
on a lot, depends on the zone. Are you talking about a high density
In this
zone?
area, in this
Okay.
area.
Yeah, we would require that a shadow plat or some kind of proposed plat is provided to us showing that it could be developed to the minimum density requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had contacted this. Did you want to say something?
Just want to clarify something from last week. I brought it up. What was the minimum number of housing units? And I thought I heard the number that could be on this acreage, and I thought I heard the number 58. But you just told me if I heard correctly, the minimum number is 7 per acre, and there's 6 point something acres. So we're talking 42, 43 would be the minimum to qualify as residential high density. Is that correct?
So it's 58, and these are based on calculations that staff had determined. I would need to pull up that sheet. I was not ready for these questions. Let me pull up this information for you.
Kind of an important difference.
Yeah, let me dig through some notes and I will get back to you here in just a few moments.
All right.
Okay, while you're looking that up, I had emailed the staff prior to this meeting and told them I'd be asking the questions of the Public Works staff. According to Josh's staff report, he talks about a intergovernmental agreement between ODOT and the city. And also that according to the agreement, it provides additional detail of the improvements that are proposed for the 197 Fremont intersection. I was hoping that either Dave Anderson or Dale McCabe could tell us the substance of that agreement, kind of a short summary, and then secondly, to tell us what those additional improvements for that intersection are and the timing of those proposed improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Needs to be up a little bit more.
You could turn your volume up a little, that'd be great.
Okay, I will try to do that personally.
Okay.
So the agreement is a multi-jurisdictional agreement with ODOT. There are a number of other entities involved around the state as ODOT developed a project to make improvements in a number of different communities. For us, they're looking at 3 or 4 intersections just to make signage, striping type of improvements. For Fremont and 197, we're looking at some improvements that could also include active driver feedback signs like radar signs to indicate speed. We have talked to them and they said that would be a good fit. We're also looking at doing some striping improvements that would install some horizontal hashes that tend to make a lane appear narrower and serve to slow traffic down. And the timing of those improvements are scheduled to be constructed next September of 2021. I would add that the original scope of work for that project, which did not yet include the radar feedback signs, anticipated that ODOT was paying all the costs. There was no match from the city. The city's offered to contribute some match if warranted to add the radar feedback signs.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any other questions of the staff? Councilor McLaughlin.
Timeline. You had asked for a timeline.
He said September of 2021.
2021.
Any other questions for the staff? Okay, we will now move to the applicant. Mr. Housley, do you have anything you'd like to say? Do you have 5 minutes?
I just want to preface my comments by Mr. Crean gave me a call earlier today to inform me about the annexation condition, and I conferred with our client and we are okay with that. And then I would like to reserve most of my time for rebuttal, but just give you a preview of what was in the letter that we submitted today. During last week's public hearing, the council asked a lot of great questions regarding the infrastructure that's being extended to the site, and we provided that in detail in the letter, along with the references to the engineer's materials. And then there's a whole host of arguments, again, related to the sidewalk and some case law that's supportive of what Mr. Crean's advice was last week, as well as a discussion of the state's needed housing statute. And with that, I think I'd rather just let the public provide their testimony and provide most of my comments back on rebuttal, please.
Fair enough. Mr. Marash, do you have anything you'd like to say before we hear from the public?
Yes, I would. I just got Mr. Housley's letter about a half an hour ago. Looks like my camera is cutting off my head.
There you go.
I'm not sure. So I'm at my law firm. Last time it was working, but maybe I'll lean back so you can see me a little bit. Is that better?
You look
Okay.
great, yes.
I just got his letter. I was in the car at 4:30. It looks like it came in at 4:30. I was in the car driving to my office so I could be at the firm's conference room. So I'd like to rebut his letter briefly. I did read it. I haven't had a chance to study it. I noticed, he called me the leading expert on takings, which, I'm flattered. I'm flattered at that. But then I also noticed that he's threatening the city quite a bit in the letter with personal liability and lawsuits and all this stuff. I just don't see it. I mean, he cites a case that I was involved in where the city was treating one applicant different from another. Based on the fact that the applicant's lawyer was friends with the mayor and had been to his wedding. And I don't think there's any of those allegations here. Jamie and I are both in Vancouver and we don't have any particular contacts in the Dalles. So I don't think this is a case that is at all similar to the David Hill v. Forest Grove case that they cited in the letter that I was involved in litigating. But I would like to address the substance of what he says in the letter. One of the things he says is that somehow it's the neighbor's obligation because they have a leading takings lawyer who's representing him. It's the neighbor's obligation to have me do a full takings analysis, which would require first, before you can even get to a takings analysis, you got to do the safety analysis. And I don't think it's these neighbors' obligation to go hire engineers to design the project, to design the intersection improvements, to study what needs to be done at the intersection to make it safe, to study the sidewalks in more detail. They have hired a traffic engineer, Han Lee, to do some limited analysis to point out what needs to be done. And in my prior letter and in his report, he suggested what needs to be done. But instead of analyzing those issues, the applicant just wants to get threatening, which I think is the wrong approach. And I also think it's wrong under the takings law. In the first place, we can't do any kind of a takings analysis until we know exactly what needs to be done to make the project safe. And that's because to do a takings analysis, you have to weigh the impacts of the development against whatever it is the city says needs to be done in order to approve the development. And we don't know exactly what needs to be done because it hasn't been adequately studied, particularly with respect to the intersection. So they cite this Koontz case in their letter. Now, Koontz held that if it wouldn't meet Dolan to approve the application with a condition because the burden of the condition was disproportional, then the city can't turn around and just deny it in an effort to avoid the Dolan analysis. And that's a US Supreme Court case, so that's binding. But here, the applicant hasn't done the safety analysis that we've asked for, that we think is required under the code. And so you don't even reach the constitutional question until the safety analysis has been done. And the application could be denied, not because you want to impose something that's disproportional, but because you don't know exactly what you need to impose as far as intersection improvements or sidewalk improvements until somebody does a little more study of it, as we've asked. And we think that that burden falls on the applicant to do that study, not the neighbors. But even assuming they do that study, once that's done and we have a little more meat on the bones as far as what would need to be done to the intersection and what would need to be done to the sidewalks. At the last hearing, I heard the testimony from the city engineer. It might cost $435,000 to put sidewalks on one street.
Mr. Marash, you have 30 seconds.
How much?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. So we think there needs to be more meat on that bones from the applicant before that kind of analysis can even be done. And then finally, I would like to address the state law that says housing has to be clear and objective. I don't see anything that's unclear or unobjective about the city's codes that we went through last time, and I won't go through them again because we don't have time. But those seem pretty clear and objective to me, so I don't think that the state housing law is triggered here at all. And the case cited in the letter, the Walter case, is distinguished because in that case, the city acknowledged in a prior staff memo that its code was ambiguous and needed to be fixed.
Okay.
And here you don't have that situation. So for all those reasons, we're urging denial at this point. And if the applicant wants to study the safety issues further, then we could look, the city could look at a Dolan analysis.
Thank you very much. Mr. Housley, you have anything to say? You have the last word.
I mean, I appreciate Mr. Marash's take on this. I wholeheartedly disagree with his analysis on this. First of all, the simple fact that he's asking for this analysis to be done is showing that there is no clear and objective standard contained in the city code. And so, and because he didn't provide anything, or the city didn't rely on that when the staff issued its initial decision or the planning commission decision, there's simply no facts to support his position. And again, I think Mr. Crean during the last hearing provided council with an overview of the state's needed housing statute that talked about the need for clear and objective criteria. And again, we feel that we've met our burden with that, with the approval. And what Mr. Marash would have us do is study something that is not clear and objective and therefore does not meet that. And therefore, the aspects of what he calls in our letter threats, I don't think that. It's more of a warning as opposed to the decision makers here.
Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to open this public hearing up for public testimony. There are three categories of public testimony. First, those that have registered in advance. Second, those that did not register in advance but would like to testify over Zoom. And finally, those that have called in on their phones, either a cell phone or a landline. And we will take those in the order I just described. So I have, it's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 people registered to speak against the project and 1 in favor. I have, and this will be the order, so be ready. Gary Gingrich, second, Steve Lawrence, third, Randy Hager, fourth, Steve Murray, fifth, Karen Murray, sixth, Jennifer Weller, seventh, Catherine Blackmar, ninth, Linda Quackenbush, and 10th, Anna Gatan. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And 1 in favor would be Nate Stice. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gary Gingrich, who has 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes to testify. And again, I will try my best to let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. Mr. Gingrich. Oh, I forgot that.
Gary, we can't hear you.
Mr. Gingrich, we cannot hear you.
To unmute me. I thank you for unmuting me. Thank you. I'm going to back up just a little bit. This kind of says what I think. I think this is the wrong plan for the wrong place, and it's coming at the wrong time. I'm basing that on sort of a little bit different view than we've been presented. Starting with a satellite view of the Dalles, where you can see where the neighbors are concerned are located, where amenities and businesses are, flight path to the airport, and this is where the Grove is planned. If the Grove goes where it's planned, there will be cars that arrive want to go places. These are the places they would go. The people most familiar with this area have serious concerns about the safety of our present and future neighbors on a road system that is marginal, hazardous, poorly maintained, and already overburdened. And these are the sites that we're most concerned about. In the interest of time, I'm going to concentrate on the site that I know best and just deal with the intersection of 10th Street, on which I live, Old Duffer Road, 9th Street, on which some of you live, and Thompson. The majority of the people leaving or going to the Grove will pass through this intersection. That's already been clear in testimony. The variety of choices that a person in this intersection has is bewildering. I've drawn the potential turn lines and traffic lines through the intersection, and I think you'll agree that there's high potential for the usual reactions to a complex decision that has to be made on the fly. One of the primary problems with this intersection is visual obstruction. There are 3 places where this is most evident. In the yellow circle is a very acute turn from a stop sign or across a stop sign. And the line of sight here is impeded by parked vehicles and plants, and honestly by restrictions of range of motion of the driver's neck. The red circle highlights a home that was built with very little setback from the intersection. There is a stop sign adjacent to the home. I'll show you that in a minute. The blue circle is the intersection of 9th Street, which is the only access for a number of people who live in this region down here. Since we didn't really have the kind of traffic safety study that most of us could relate to, I kind of did a poor man's do-it-yourself traffic study, and and I asked some questions in this neighborhood. I said, is it just me, or is this a hazardous intersection? How much additional traffic can this intersection safely handle? Have you seen an accident at this intersection? Because we're told that there aren't any on record. How often do you experience near accidents at this intersection? I knocked on every door in this picture. 19 residents were at home, 18 talked to me and answered my questions. Adding up the years that they have lived at and observed this intersection, we come to 150 years, which I invite you to oppose to the counterweight against the 1 hour of observation in the traffic study. Results: is it hazardous? 83% felt that it was dangerous. None felt it was safe. 1 felt it was safe enough unless traffic increases. 1 felt it was stupid beyond belief. Another one, I've quoted only blanks for obvious reasons. The next question, how much additional traffic can this intersection safely handle? This is what the people on the ground feel. None for 95%, not much, which is, I'm sorry, not quantifiable, 5%. Have you seen an accident?
Mr. Gingrich, you have 30 seconds, sir.
You know, I've waited a long time and I've invested a lot to talk. So I'm going to finish this, but I believe I should be granted more time.
Sir, if I do it for you, you're the first speaker. We have a long agenda ahead of us, and I'm not charging you for the time that I'm speaking. So please.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. You can't stop at this stop sign on the line and see. That's a front porch. This is our city planning that we've depended on so far. Okay, pedestrian safety, where's the crosswalk? If you crunch the this is the bike lane with one victim. Accessibility, we have a wheelchair bound person in this home who has to cross this intersection to the mailbox. Another accessibly challenged person in this home has to make the same hazardous trip. Bottom line, there are a lot of valid questions that I'm not arguing, and I'll let you guys do that. But
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, safety has to come first. You can't build it without safety in a responsible way. The safety is not there. It needs to be there first before you approve. And I really should have had more time, Mr. Mayor.
Well, sir, we've announced well in advance that we had 5 minutes, so I'm sorry,
Okay.
but we're going to have to move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Steve Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence?
Yes. Mayor and City Council, Steve Lawrence, 2017 View Court. The proposed development would be a community disaster. During 2018-19, when City Council discussed the new zoning ordinance with planning, we emphasized infill, using vacant lots and allowing for smaller houses on existing properties, all within city limits. We were guided by past vision statements. The 2002 vision emphasized new neighborhoods where developers would create residential with commercial areas, homes close to jobs and services. We were also guided by the 2011 vision statement, which described consistent annual meetings allowing for constructive dialogue. That has not been occurring. The planning department had that responsibility. Key goals were to develop upper floor housing downtown in compatible neighborhoods. The plan looked at the west side where additional urban lands have been established and set aside for affordable housing. There are two major issues with this application. First, the planning department relies on a zoning ordinance based on House Bills 2001 and 2003, which addressed housing throughout the state, but hasn't yet been implemented. Under House Bill 2001, medium cities were not required to comply until 6/30/21, so administrative rules can be developed. Cities will be required to set reasonable siting and design requirements on houses, including adequate infrastructure. The law directs the state to help cities figure out their infrastructure gaps. The state is to conduct rulemaking to provide a model code. That is only now in process. The last meeting was held August 18, 2020. The charge to the Housing Rulemaking Advisory Committee is to develop rules that provide affordable living choices and allow for a phased development consistent with infrastructure supply. I can tell you from reading the written submissions for this last hearing, many cities and the League of Cities are requesting additional considerations and amendments to what is now being proposed. Our planning department is going forward without knowing if they are in compliance. It is very apparent a colossal mistake was made to designate the area of the application high density in the 90s. Even the transportation system plan documents why it should not have been. It cites the population in 1995 as 14,776, projected to be 18,630 by 2015. It also projected in 95 that peak hour traffic on Old Duffer Road would grow from 180 to 400 by 2015. And then 197 in Fremont already had a slightly higher than average crash rate with 4 crashes from 190 to 1292. It projected growth in Columbia View Drive at peak hour to go from 60 to 260. All this was part of the rationale for designating this area high density. Now here's the truth. Portland State University Population Center, the official population determinant for all cities and counties in Oregon, states as follows. This last March 2020, the Dow's was 16,148. Only by 2045 is it projected to reach 18,823. In 1996, their projected growth was inflated 30 years off. Second, our planning department did not require a developer to do a thorough traffic study and detail infrastructure. Testimony of the planning department was basically, we'll figure it out as we go. The reality is this development would impose a huge volume of traffic and burden on rural roads and intersections that in reality have truly not been adequately measured. Because of the colossal mistake in originally designating this area high density, you should give this and any other application in this area strict scrutiny and set realistic mandatory requirements for safety, density, and infrastructure. Don't be fooled by planners who tell you you have no choice. This town belongs to the citizens, not planners or developers. You represent the citizens. Please deny this application and affirm the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Randy Hager. Mr. Hager.
I'm getting settled here. Randolph Hager, 2800 East 10th Street. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, staff, community, city council. My address is to the issues of handling and mishandling, referring to it as betrayal by city planning staff has left us with a discordant procedure that doesn't fit any practiced or preset or established state or municipal code of conduct. Staff members were evidently motivated by personal decisions and reasoning, which led directly to misrepresentation of development procedure and the disregard for community involvement and a failed attempt to pacify a developer. If you, City Council, as decision makers are to identify how this process deviated from the historically preset rules, you are only to read with sincere intent the community members' appeal to deny approval of this application. The community members' appeal to deny now stands as a hallmark of understanding the issues which prevent the approval of the Dalles planning staff. Planning staff, having proceeded to approve without mindfulness to our own municipal code, became a twofold betrayal. First, on our community, and second, on the developer. By suggesting approval of the developer's processes and failing to identify to the developer that, though development could occur, planning staff failed to add the catch term, quote, however, we are not prepared to allow you street access or infrastructure as we have failed to provide mandatory infrastructure to and from your potential site. Streets are not up to code. No sidewalks or Americans with disabilities provisions, no storm sewer, no pedestrian services, no bike access, no preparedness likely to support approval, leaving the population at risk. Community members are not attempting to deny a builder's right to proceed. However, a reasonable person would suggest compliance with existing standards should all be adhered to and keep continuity of the community respected. What we do deny is the process by which city staff failed to prepare the legitimate infrastructure. No processes to comply with the 1998 zoning change development necessities has occurred and cannot be discarded or neglected for the sake of big money changing hands and an entire community exposed to incompletion and risk. Community members and their legal counsel present to you the proper information to guide and safeguard your right and obligation to deny this past misguided approval. Denial to proceed is imminent and must be made to stand on behalf of the safety and welfare of both builder and community. Furthermore, it is my personal opinion as a retired home builder involved in the building trades for over 50 years that as much as the planning staff should have and could have recognized the severity of approving such a sizable development without giving proper regard to the multiple issues of the legacy application, legacy personnel themselves had as full a responsibility to be self-assured, even though staff was negligent.
Mr. Hager, you have 30 seconds.
Legacy was obligated to see their plan was supported and that full cost considerations had been given to the adversity of infrastructure. I want to personally thank John Geiger for sharing with his community his original and quite professional plan for the small parcel of orchard on which still stands his parents' home. John's family developed and operated Geiger Orchards for over 100 years, and he stewarded the orchard personally until his recent retirement.
Mr. Hager, that's your 5 minutes is up, sir.
John's
Thank you.
plan for
Mr. Hager.
I just got 2 sentences, Steve. John's plan for 12 to 14 single-family homes on the small 8-acre parcel was eventually denied by the Dalles planning staff under the guise of state mandates. John has since kept a few of us living near him aware of the betrayals and shenanigans of the Dalles planning staff, and today openly voices his opinion that what's happening now with a complex of up to 80 homes is not fit for land.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. That's enough. I think you've run over your time. And
The 1900s. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
okay, next is Steve Murray. Please give your name and address, Mr. Murray.
Steve.
Okay, one more time.
Okay, my name is Steve Murray. I live at 2645 East 11th Street here in the Dalles. And one of the concerns I had was last week, the developer could not answer how much or the price range for the houses in this development. And I'm wondering, why would he buy a large plot of land, plan out to build 80 residences on it, and that's going to cost him a lot of money to do that, and yet have no idea how much the places are going to sell for. I would think as a developer, he would have to know that when he started the project. The second thing is, beyond Richmond Street, there are several large vacant areas that are kind of ripe for development also. And each one of those is going to add more and more traffic to the already subpar roads in the area. At what point are we going to say we need to fix the roads in anticipation of future development? Because 20 years ago, it was zoned high density and nothing's been done to fix the roads since that was originally done. I've lived at this address for 23 years. And we're lucky when we get some gravel on our street. There hasn't been much of anything going on to improve the roads. They were repaved a couple of years ago, but they weren't widened. We sometimes go a half a year without striping the road. So before we put a development of 80 dwelling units into this area, we need to have the roads fixed and make them capable of carrying the traffic that's going to show up. In the long-term plan, they estimated 350 new dwelling units in the area, and the roads here just can't handle that. At what point are the roads going to be fixed enough to meet the expected growth in the area, and at whose expense is it going to happen? I don't think that the current residents should be forced to pay to improve the roads so that developers can come in and make a fortune off of developing new houses. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Ms. Karen Murray.
Hi. Karen Murray, 2645 East 11th Street in the Dalles. We're about a long block from the proposed area. And I come before you, city councilors and Mayor Mays, deeply concerned about the events surrounding the legacy development project called The Grove. I've been writing this letter to you in my head for months, since the beginning of March 2020, when Mayor Mays told us at a city council meeting that we would have our day to speak. In doing some research, I read about your fall city council meeting that you had on October 28th, 2019, where the city council finally approved the updating of the Dalles City Land Use Planning Guidelines. And that's the one that removed the compatibility clause for buildings in the neighborhood. And it was unanimous, where new construction didn't have to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and where triplexes could be built with a 10-foot bonus if they met certain requirements. I just really wondered, did anyone on the city council have wind of the Grove project prior to that vote? I know that Legacy Development was working with our community development department months before this vote, and this vote seemed like it would seal the deal for a project like the Grove. Cameron Curtis bought the property in February of 2019, I think, and I assume he needed those changes to be able to build in that former cherry orchard, surrounded by about 15 nice single-family homes. So that's one of my questions. Also, it's become common knowledge since everyone started investigating this project that the property has been zoned high density since the 1990s. A cherry orchard zoned high density. Was the owner, John Geiger, or his dad on the city council at that time? Has this deal been in the makings for a while? You just have to wonder, because you're like, a cherry orchard? And it would have been a cherry orchard for a long time after that 1990 vote for high density residential. And since it's been zoned high density for over 20 years, and my husband mentioned this, why hasn't the city invested some of our taxes? Now, we happen to be in the city limits, and we've been paying taxes for over 30 years. And the project is outside the city boundaries, but it's within the urban growth boundary. But why hasn't any money gone into the safety infrastructure that surrounds this high density area, where the developer will make that new neighborhood relatively safe? The surrounding area is not. It needs wider streets. It needs sidewalks on both 10th and 12th. Heading towards town, it needs smoother shoulders. It needs some bike lanes. Anyone familiar with that area knows that. We walk up there all the time and it can be dangerous. There's two blind hills. It has been over 20 years since it was zoned high density, and this area is still dangerous. It would be irresponsible in my mind to allow a development without major upgrades to the infrastructure, including some of the intersections. Dr. Gingrich mentioned the one at 10th and Thompson and Old Duffer and 9th Street. The mayor last week mentioned that if the predictions for travel increase pan out, it means that we'll have an 80% increase in the trips. And that would just be horrendous if that data is correct, regardless of what the ODOT chart says. And then there's other intersections that need some work, the Fremont and Highway 197, and then the Richmond and Old Duffer Road. We live up here. We don't want traffic accidents. I'm hoping also that, on another point, that Mr. Cameron Curtis could shed a little light, since he's purchased the property early last year. What would most of the buildings be would they be purchased by investors who would turn around and rent their properties out? So there would be renters moving in and out without a lot of owners living on site. That's what I'm guessing. What will that do to the property values and what, rental prices? I wish he had some answers for some of one of the questions last week in terms of costs. I think I can speak for most of the residents in our area. We are not against growth, but we think it should be reasonable. 30 seconds. It should be safe. Bottom line, most of us feel that this piece of property was zoned incorrectly, considering a 6-mile round trip to the nearest decent sized grocery store and the impact of 80 trips that would have. Think long and hard, City Council, before allowing this project to go ahead. It had severe adverse effects. And we feel that you should infill vacant areas near downtown. Thank you for your time and thank you for being willing to serve on City Council.
Thank you. You timed that perfectly. Next will be Jennifer Weller. Please let us know your address, please, Ms. Weller. Want me to call her name again?
I'm not seeing her. Unless she's.
Is Jennifer Weller here? Okay, we're going to move on to the next speaker. If Ms. Weller, if you are here, can she text or contact somebody?
She can do chat, I guess.
Yeah, you can get on the chat and let us know you're here and we'll come back to you. Next is Catherine Blackmore. Ms. Blackmore. Catherine Blackmore. Okay, once again, if you do show up or we don't see your name anywhere, so we're going to move on to Linda Quackenbush. Ms. Quackenbush.
Are they muted on their end?
I'm searching.
She don't know she's here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Hello, hi.
thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Linda Quackenbush and my address is Post Office Box 1074 in the Dalles. I was a resident at 1005 Richmond Street for 37 years with my husband. This is my neighborhood that we're discussing this evening. We, as Karen mentioned, we are not against reasonable development. We know housing is important to our city as a whole, but it only makes sense to add development sensibly, taking seriously and cautiously the safety and the livability of the surrounding streets. According to the ITE manual, for 80 dwellings, there will be 755 average trips per day, which along with residents include delivery trucks, school buses, service vehicles, mail, garbage removal, just as examples. These surrounding streets will be directly impacted by all of these vehicles and more. City councilors, please think long and cautiously how 80 doors in less than 7 acres would fit in this community. The development will not answer the need for low-income housing as the rents would not be considered low income. Unimproved streets do not equate public safety. Would you wish to live on a 25-foot wide parcel, which is what many of these buildings would sit on? As rentals, these properties will very likely degrade. The first applicant wanting to invest and build on this property was told that 48 units was the minimum he could build. Why do we need 80? Counselors, you represent me. You represent my husband, our parents, our son, his wife, and our grandchildren. Our family now has 6 generations in the Dalles. We have a long history here of livability in this community. Also, you represent all the neighbors from Richmond Street on 10th and 12th, clear to Thompson. None of these streets have sidewalks except for a couple of small islands. The streets do not even have shoulders, so ditches are the safety zone for pedestrians. I hope our city councilors represent all of us, not just the Planning Commission and not just the developer. and we hope that you represent our entire community. The current high-density zoning is inappropriate, and due process for us citizens was lost from the beginning. We urge you to look at the designation of high density and the impact appropriate for this area and our community as a whole. We would like to see the high density zoning changed. There are so many problems discussed last week and this evening that we strongly feel this development should be denied as proposed. The whole figure it out later process is not worthy of the Dalles. Thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness.
Thank you, Ms. Quackenbush. Next, we have Anna Gatan or Gatan.
Or Gatton, that works too. Good evening. My father wanted to sign up to talk, but since it's under my account, I guess you get to hear me instead. So you'll have to bear with me because I'm reading through his writing here, which is not eloquent as mine because he's a man. Just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, so upon proposal, when all of this first started, there were 7 arguments that were raised against the development of this land, and yet it still moved forward. So the question would be, why has so much money been put in on the part of city planners, on the part of doing investigations, when there were so many arguments against the land to begin with? That would be my dad's first question. It's really hard to try to cite a bunch of city ordinances when it's not just the city ordinances that are going to be impacted by this proposed development. It would be kind of like giving a diagnosis of cancer by only looking at one symptom of the problem. So I'm going to choose to spend my time not rehashing what other people have already brought up, but to bring up some other things that would be really helpful to think about when you are thinking about putting this land in. First of all, I guess the question of, not having safe point of travel for kids to walk back and forth. We moved here 5 years ago, and part of the draw for buying our home was that it was rural. Had I known that it was designated as high density, first of all, I would have asked where, because it's not high density out here. And my second question is, if it's high density, then why don't we have the infrastructure put in this plot of land? Why do I have to walk my daughter to the bus stop through a ditch to make sure that she's safe? When you think about adding 80 new dwellings, that's going to be probably at least 80 kids, probably more. And where are those kids going to go? I can tell you that Dry Hollow is already bursting at the seams. There's already kids in portable classrooms out in the back field. So that leads me to believe that all of the district lines are going to have to be moving children from Dry Hollow to Colonel Wright, from Colonel Wright to Chenoweth. So it's not just the neighborhood up here that's going to be affected. It's going to be the entire town. Let's see. Back in the fall, we went to a meeting at the senior center where they talked about this project. And we were told at that time that we would not have to pay to put sidewalks in. But now if this plan goes through, I'm assuming that sidewalks are going to be part of the deal. And who does that cost fall on? Is it going to be on my family to pay for sidewalks? Is it going to be on the city? Is it going to be the developer that pays that money? So I guess that's a big question. It sounds like other people have that question also. And if we're looking finally at the idea of having this be possible low-income housing, which the answer to that question hasn't been defined. We've heard something about the houses are going to go starting at $250,000. We've heard that they're going to be low-income housing. We've heard all kinds of things, and there hasn't been an answer to what it's going to be. But for a second, think about if it is low-income housing, and those people that need to live in that low-income housing are going to need access to be able to walk to places. We're 2 miles outside of Fred Meyer's and all of the other shopping areas here in town. There's a link bus that can come up here if you call and make an appointment for it, but it doesn't regularly make this loop. and the roads aren't ready for it to regularly make this route. So I would bring that up too. And as far as the, I guess the one city ordinance that I would bring it to was that there was a traffic strip put in here to count how many people drove up and down here. I drive back and forth multiple times for work a day, and I never once saw it. But I heard from one of my neighbors that they did see it, but it was put in place during the middle of a workday. I would like to see another traffic study done that takes place in the evening hours or on a weekend, so that you can.
Ma'am, you have 30 seconds.
Sure, so that you can get an average or an accurate response of how many people actually already drive these roads before you add 80 more dwellings or 160 more cars. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We do have one citizen who would like to speak in favor of the development, Nate Stice. Mr. Stice, are you here?
Yes, I am, Mayor Mays. Thanks for the time. For the record, Nathaniel Stice, 1010 G Street in the Dalles. As many of you know, I tend not to speak up on my personal time given my day job, and I just have to take a step back and say it's great to see your faces and miss seeing all of you on a regular basis, even if it is by Zoom. I actually tuned in last week while I was on leave and on my personal time right now because evidently I love Zoom that much. So I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the thoughtful leadership of the council in thinking about this and the many thoughtful comments that have been offered so far. So I'm going to offer a preface, and I'm going to hit the criteria, and I hope you'll indulge me in doing this preface, since it seems like we're talking about a variety of things that fall outside of the criteria instead of addressing them head on. And I guess I want to start by thanking you for welcoming me, my family, and my friends to the Dalles. I'm not from here. I'm originally from Umatilla, so not representing Portland values, actually representing maybe a little bit more rural values. I'm here today to ask you to keep the door open for others. I think what makes this town so special is its welcoming and neighborly atmosphere. I love walking up the hill in this neighborhood we're talking about because people say hi, and I hope everyone on this will continue to say hi, and happy to stop and engage in conversation on this front. And I also want to thank you for enshrining that neighborly and welcoming spirit in the City of the Dalles Development Code. In my day job, I love to brag about this town having one of the most forward-thinking and welcoming codes in the state. You guys were ahead of the pack for rural communities in adopting a code that says we welcome people here. And put differently, you were ahead of the state in putting in the policies that are enshrined in HB 2001 and 2003. And that was launched by and really shepherded by Mayor Lawrence, who spoke here. And I know there's some nuance there, but I do want to acknowledge the leadership on that front. In short, the Dalles was ahead of the game on thinking about how we keep this town affordable for people. And I'm really damn proud of that. I mention these things because I'm afraid that if we deviate from our values and from our code, if we deny this development based on things that fall outside of the criteria, then we risk losing that welcoming and neighborly atmosphere that makes this community special. Put differently, a vote against this project sends a clear message that we don't want new people, families, or professionals here. It will send a message to other developers looking at the Dalles as well, and we have trouble getting them here in any case. And this is where I want to start getting into the criteria, and I'm going to start with the elephant in the room criteria that everyone keeps referencing, but that is outside of bounds, and that's neighborhood character. 10th Street is on my walking route almost every day. I usually go up 10th and back down 12th, and I can tell you, my spouse who's sitting here likes to make fun of me because I love walking around neighborhoods and looking for density. And there is density all the way up to this site. In fact, there's duplexes, triplexes. There's an attached fourplex that's almost directly across from it. And so to say that there's no density here is a little bit misleading. It is already there. And I would welcome anyone on the council if you would like to take a socially distant walk with me. I can point out how that fits well into the fabric of this neighborhood. I think we also need to talk about outcomes when we're talking about density. And one thing that I've learned over time is that, and I kind of just want to say thank you to whatever planner did plat high density landing here, because what we know is that if we want a strong community and strong community outcomes, We need mixed density and mixed income neighborhoods. I'm happy again to point anyone, whether they're the folks speaking here or counselors, to the literature that talks about this. So this was actually a very forward-thinking zoning of this property. And it really is the character of the Dalles period. We have density in my neighborhood, which is an adjacent neighborhood where we have people who are doctors, lawyers, day laborers, all city employees, all living together in the same neighborhood. In any case, on all of these neighborhood character arguments, I think the point here is they're outside of bounds. That's not what the code is about. And so I'll go on to the more formal criteria. And this is where I have to ask you to really listen to your staff and apply the code, because this is about applying the code and nothing else. And I have to like take a step back and say, you have great staff. I know them to be caring, honest professionals who have worked really hard to steward this community. And so it really frustrates me when I hear them disparaged in this meeting.
Mr. Stice, you have 30 seconds, okay?
All right.
Yep.
So I'll just end with a couple of statistics. I clocked a 2-bedroom, 1-bath rental in this town for $1,450, and single family homes are going up for $300. If we want to address the housing affordability crisis, we can't turn a developer away. We need to increase supply. Happy to talk about any more of the criteria pieces if you would like to discuss them offline.
Thank you very much. Last call for Catherine Blackmar or Jennifer Weller. Okay, we're now moving to that part of the public hearing where we will take additional testimony to those that did not register in advance. And these are people that have Zoomed in through their computer. If you called in, we'll get to you after these people speak. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand and we will call on you. And you will have up to 5 minutes to give your testimony, and I will attempt to let you know when you have 30 seconds left. I see Mr. Steve Hudson raising his hand. Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Please give your address and proceed.
2727 East 10th. Been in this house for a little over a year. Yeah, there's been a lot of good things brought up, and safety, of course, is something that keeps coming up. And I gather that there's been some concern about Fremont and 197. And that's not the only bad intersection, but it is an outstandingly bad intersection. There's no way you can put some striping over there or put a radar in or anything else that's going to significantly improve that intersection. There was some discussion some time back about putting an overpass there because of the proposed schools over in the Columbia View area. And I think that was one of the reasons they finally abandoned that idea, because there was no safe way to get students in and out of that area because of that horrible intersection. I challenge you to go east on Fremont and make a left-hand turn onto 197 and do that a half a dozen times without having at least one close call, especially if there's any heavy traffic. And I would point out that if you're in this development, that if you plug into your GPS and say, I want to go east or west on I-84, either direction, it's going to direct you out Fremont and down 197. That is the closest place to access the freeway in either direction. So you're going to have commuters in the morning in a hurry to get to work with possibly people behind them trying to access that intersection. On your left, you've got people coming around a blind curve that I'm not sure what the distance visibility is, but it is obscured, possibly a quarter mile, maybe less. And they are speeding up because they're going up Auction Yard Hill. Then you've got people coming out of the Columbia View area. They're either going right, they're going left, or they're going straight, and they too are trying to get into traffic from that intersection. And who has the right of way? I don't know sometimes. I'm sitting there and I look at the person across the way and is it your turn, my turn? Are we going to go for it or whatever? And then to your right, you've got people coming down Auction Yard Hill, some people who have been traveling an hour or more at 65 miles an hour. You've got grain trucks, tractor trailers, buses, all sorts of vehicles coming down that hill. And they are going at a good clip. Now, if you could slow them down to 25 miles an hour, that would be a great improvement, but you're not going to do that. If you go over there, you can see the skid marks of the trucks that have failed to slow down as much, you know, when they're coming to the curve at the bottom of the hill. So again, everyone in that development, if they need to access I-84 to go to Hood River or the Portland or any place east, that's the route they're going to take. You can't fix it as short of an overpass. And the only thing you can do is minimize the amount of traffic that goes out that way. And bringing in 60 or 70 new residences to that area, who many of whom will access that, is just irresponsible. It's horribly unsafe, and there is no really safe route out of that development. It just doesn't work. And I might point to the intersection that was just modified over by Cherry Heights and 2nd Street. They decided that that was too dangerous to make a left-hand turn there. So now they have prohibited, with expensive traffic barriers and whatnot, anybody coming out of the Staples Safeway parking lot from making a left-hand turn onto 2nd, because I'm sure they have determined it's just not safe. And if that's not safe, Fremont and 197 is an accident waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Danny Anslinger. Please give your address and you have up to 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm actually Danny's wife, Shelley, and my address currently is 2012 East 14th Street. But I grew up at 2637 East 10th, which is just down from the development. And I also am hoping to build right next to 2637 East 10th in the next year. And I just really wanted to speak to 2 points. The first one for me is just really a safety concern. So I just really would like to urge the council members to really, really look over that. I have 2 small children, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. We're going to be living on that street for a long time, and they're going to be taking the bus there. I grew up on that street. I know what those blind hills are like. I had a friend, one of my best friends lived right across the street, and backing out with the traffic as it is now was dangerous. It was like, she had to back out a certain way out of her driveway. If you're going to add so many more houses and cars coming and going, it's just going to make it worse. And I just really, it makes me nervous for my kids walking from the bus. It makes me nervous for them when they're going to drive one day, coming in and out of there. It makes me nervous for my parents who live there as they're getting older, that, just people zooming up and down the street. It's a serious safety concern. And I know that there are studies that can show you whatever you want to hear, to be honest. But the reality is that it is adding that many more cars up and down is going to be unsafe. I appreciate the fact that they tried to move Bradley Street in the development, but to be honest, there's no way to move that street as it is and make it safe. So I just would really, really like to urge counselors, just think about, like, if you're walking that street, if you have your kids walking that street, what's it going to be like with all those new cars there? The other concern that I do have as a homeowner is just what the cost is going to be for this infrastructure. Mr. Housley talked about, that it's going to improve the Dalles with infrastructure that they're going to put in, but I don't know how that is possible, because they're only adding to their own development. So it's really only addressing what's there. And then it's going to just add an impact to the rest of the towns, to our water, our sidewalks, our streets, our sewer. And to be honest, I know that I believe as Mr. Anderson talked about that if we add sidewalks, that it would increase the storm. What was it? The storm. It would increase. It would require stormwater improvements that would then come out of the sewer fund. Well, and to be honest, my water bill is $103 as the base right now. It can't be any more. Like, I think that, as we're talking about being affordable to live in the Dalles, one of the things is utilities. So when we're looking at those making improvements, it can't be that we're just going to keep tagging and tagging and tagging on top of our homeowners for these other things that are going to come in. We need to be responsible about it. So I think that was all that I had, but I just thank you guys for listening to us as a community. And I just really, really want to urge those two points, because as a homeowner, those impact us. It's not, it's our families and it's our life. That it makes a big difference in our day-to-day activities, regardless of codes, regardless of anything else. It's a matter of how we're going to be living and what's going to affect us as we go day to day. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a name? No. Please feel free to raise your hand and we will call on you. Is Randy Katz or Katz?
This is Randy Katz, and I live at 2724 East 12th Street, and I design custom homes, and I work with the staff, and I also know about the code that is for the city, and it's a big responsibility for the city to create a code that is for the benefit of the community. It's a big job. Now, I have a question, and I think Karen Murray answered it, but if in fact staff can answer this question of when was compatibility taken out of the code for high density? Can any of the staff answer that question?
Mr. Katz, I'm going to stop your clock and allow you to continue, and we'll give the opportunity for the staff to answer that question after your testimony, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer that. That was the recent housing code amendment that was discussed earlier. It was approved by City Council in October.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. You're 40 seconds in, so you got plenty of time.
So with respect to the development and the infrastructure that is going to be required, it was mentioned by Mr. Anderson that on 10th Street is going to cost $570,000 for sidewalks and street improvements, and $435,000 for 12th Street. But that did not include any storm sewer, and there was no number given to the storm sewer. I can't imagine putting in curb and sidewalks and not putting in storm sewer. Mr. Anderson, can you say that you would build a street without storm sewers?
We'll get back to Mr. Anderson after your testimony, okay?
Okay, thank you.
By the way, to clarify, I did not ask Mr. Anderson for the price of storm sewer. I just asked him for the sidewalk, and that sidewalk number was an estimate, a very rough estimate. So please go ahead.
Okay. The other item that wasn't really addressed quite specifically, the appellant's attorney asked about specifics on the sizes of the houses and on the lot and that sort of thing. There is in the code a lot coverage requirement. And I would like to see, and I'm wondering if the staff has actually seen that the lot coverage has been met by the development. By the looks of what I see when you have triplexes, the center piece would be very difficult to meet the lot coverage requirement. That needs to be addressed specifically. 10th and 12th Street between Thompson and Richmond feels like a county road because it looks like a county road, especially with the orchards. People, including myself, find it difficult to drive 25 miles per hour. I would say probably the average is 35 on a city street. That is way too fast. I have actually witnessed vehicles that have driven about 90 miles an hour up our street on 12th Street. And if you, boy, I'd sure like to get that guy. We walk our dog every day on all those streets. And we have to get out of the road when cars come, either one way or another, especially at that blind hill. And I can't imagine having kids, if it were my kids in that development, walking down that street to school. Or they're probably picked up by, but there's still going to be people walking down that, and there are going to be kids doing it. It is just totally unsafe. I appreciate your time. Now, I would really request that this one question, counselors, if you approve this amendment to making this compatibility not be part of this code, did you realize that that was going to impact this development in this location? And if you did, shame on you. If you didn't realize that this actually is going to impact this, I think you ought to reconsider this, removing the compatibility issue from the code. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, are you there?
Yes, I am. I believe it was actually my testimony or the information I provided at the last meeting indicated that putting sidewalks on some 10th Street or 12th Street would serve as a trigger for installing a stormwater system. We didn't prepare that cost. It's identified in the stormwater master plan, but I didn't receive that question and didn't bring the cost of that improvement with me tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Chandler, can you address the question that the previous speaker raised?
Regarding lot coverage, we are not reviewing placement of buildings at this time. That was referenced in both, let's see, the subdivision, original subdivision application for 74-19. It was referenced in the appeal subdivision 030-20. It was also referenced in the most recent staff report. Let me see. It would be under argument E.
Are we on?
So lot coverage is determined at the time of the building permit. If a house doesn't meet lot coverage, the house is not approved.
Thank you. Okay, would somebody else like to raise their hand and speak?
I'm looking to people have, so let's see what we can find.
Who is it? Oh,
Right here, Emily Fitzgerald.
Emily Fitzgerald.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm not sure if I unmuted or something on accident. My apologies.
Was there a Josette's pad? Was that the one I saw raised?
Yes.
Okay,
Do I have to be on camera?
No.
no.
Okay.
Please say your name and address for the record.
My name is Josette Schultens. I live at 2637 East 10th Street. And I have a question about the sidewalks. I know the gentleman just said they didn't have a cost for what the storm drains and all that would cost. But I'm wondering how they're going to do that when I go down 10th Street and a good portion of the houses are below street level and another good portion are above street level. So I'm just kind of wondering what that's going to do to the existing homes. And if this development, as I think the developer stated, they call it their community. They wanted to make their community better and they wanted to enhance it, wanted it to be beautiful. I'm kind of, and they also, there was a question about whether this was the main reason that we would have the improvements made. I don't remember any call for improvements prior to them starting this, and now all of this has come up. And I'm just kind of curious as to how that's all going to work out. The sidewalks above and below, again, the cost, because it's going to be a lot. I kind of think that might have been an underestimate on what was presented before. I do concur with Mrs. Onslinger about the blind hill. The blind hill is a blind hill, no matter where you put Bradley Street. It doesn't matter where it's placed. On that hill, it's still a blind hill. The other thing, I had a question too. I'm the young man from the planning department. He showed a map the last time that showed the areas that were high density designated. And they pretty much were the north side of 10th Street down, and I believe it went beyond Richmond around the Orchard, but I could be mistaken. But I'm curious as to the minimum houses that were supposed to be on an acre to meet that high density requirement. There have been houses put in that they're well below that in the high density zone, unless the lots are extremely large. I've not noticed that there's more than that. And the ones that were put in next to Mr. Hudson are right on his property line. And he didn't mention that. It was very gracious of him to not mention that they were right on his property line. So anyway, those were just questions. Those were statements. And thank you for another chance.
You're welcome. I believe there was been a previous question and an answer indicated that the minimum number of units per acre is 7. And to my knowledge, there are no sidewalks proposed for 10th and 12th Street west of the subdivision. So your question is answered, and that's the best way I think your question can be answered. Did I miss anything else? Oh. Okay. Thank you for your questions and your testimony and complying with the 5 minutes. I'm looking for a raised hand.
Yes.
Is he unmuted?
It's unmuted. Just speak, say your name. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Steve Stroud. I live at 3004 East 12th Street in the Dalles here. I live right across the street from the development. There's 2 issues here for the council that I would like them to consider. Number 1, the development. I'm not in favor of that, but that's beside the point. The main issue here that they can say no to is the safety. I've lived there 34 years across the street from this development where the proposed development is. The roads are narrow. There's no sidewalks. There's no curbs. There's bar ditches. It's a rural setting, and it's been a rural setting my entire 34 years out there. It's going to change the entire landscape. The issues at hand, the young kids that live in the area now walk the streets to get to the bus. Cars drive fast. Roads are narrow. Wintertime on Richmond Street is a nightmare. It's very steep. It's not where you travel that time of year. You go either down 10th Street or 12th Street into town because of the unsafe steepness. Council, you can say no to this based on the safety issues alone. All the other stuff doesn't matter. Whether they dotted all their T's or anything else, they are not meeting the safety of the citizens of this community or the people that live in the neighborhood around the area. It's not right. And everybody in this community understands that. And all I'm asking you for is to look at it in separate issues. The city planning may be telling you that it's okay to go along with this, that you have to pass it, but there's 2 issues here, and safety is the number 1 issue, and it has to be addressed. And you guys, it's in your lap to do the right thing for everybody of this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? I don't see any hands raised other than one that has spoken before. Oh, here we go. Mr. Christensen.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Do you see me or hear me?
We can see you and hear you fine. Please give us your address and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll take less than that. I'm live on 2850 Old Duffer Road. I'm one of 2 properties that have sidewalks, on-street parking, and a bicycle lane. Just a couple. One thing I will just say is, yeah, that was a kind of a pain, but on my driveway, I had to be 5% grade for like 17 feet. And I have a bicycle and on-street parking lane to go across. If you look at Morton, Richmond, and I think Lambert, they're all steeper than that. So I kind of want to know if they add more properties, what makes that safe? And my driveway needs to be at a 5% grade before it approaches the road due to safety.
Is that the end of your testimony, sir?
Yeah, just kind of a complaint, but something why, builders sometimes get held to a higher standard than the city does on its streets. And if they're saying that it's a safety issue, why I have to have 5% grade for my driveway, why do the other streets not have to be that way?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anderson, did you understand the question?
Yeah, and I'm going to let Dale McCabe, our city engineer, respond to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mr.
I
McCabe.
complained to him about it a little bit too, a while back. So that's in short, I'm done. I just wanted to know why, as a builder, you have stricter standards in the main streets around you.
Okay, we're going to give Mr. McCabe a chance to answer your question, sir.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
When your access comes off of a collector or arterial street, that triggers that requirement of having a 5% grade for the first 20 feet. Because of the steepness of your driveway, we allowed the sidewalk to be part of that 20 feet. And so that's what triggered that requirement, because your access is coming off of Old Duffer Road, which is an arterial street.
But Morton, Richmond, and Lambert aren't that way. So if you have 80 to 100 homes, it's okay, it's safe. But if you're a single resident, it's okay, right?
When we look at the accesses, East 12th Street is a minor collector street, so that will trigger those requirements. If any accesses are coming off of 12th Street for this development or any other developments out there. But 10th Street is not, it's just considered a local street. Morton is also a local street, so those do not trigger that requirement.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Okay, we're going to move on to the next speaker. Do I see a hand raised? Danny Onslinger did, well, his wife did. Did you want to speak, Mr. Onslinger, or did your wife speak for you?
I think she was eloquent enough for me.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Ashley Dodson.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Hi. I just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak against this high density housing development that's going in. Part of what is so concerning to me and what I observed last meeting was the honesty and integrity of the builder. When asked about the cost of these homes, there was no budget that was set as to how much the homes would cost. And we know any smart and responsible business owner or builder would have an idea about the price it would cost to build these homes, and then the price it would be to make money on selling these homes. He also didn't know if they were going to be bought or if they were going to be rented out. I think all of those things are concerning, just because it seems that they're jumping the gun, and that is poor planning. I think that growing up in this area, I was born and raised on Old Duffer Road, 3115 Old Duffer Road. And I moved away for many years, and I came back to this side of town because it did feel like home. It was nostalgic to me. I have 3 young children, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-month-old. And one of the things that I appreciate about this area is that we have the ability to ride bikes. We can go on family walks without any sidewalks or proper infrastructure. I wouldn't be able to do that with my family. I know that when I was in grade school, the bus would stop at Richmond and 10th Street and let us off there. That walk alone as a elementary and middle school child from that corner down to Old Duffer Road was slightly terrifying. The grade is steep. There's gravel on the side of the road. It's easy to slip, not to mention when there's elements like snow and rain. So I know that there will be increase in traffic there, and that also brings me back to the honesty and integrity that we need to have for our children. We need to have the integrity to stand up for them and know that they will be safe no matter where they're living, no matter if they're in this new housing development or if they have been raised in some of these homes around the development. I know that another gentleman was talking about how we need to welcome people here. We are very welcoming in the right situation. We need to, welcome people and know that they are going to be taken care of. So it's our responsibility as the citizens to ensure that that's also going to happen. I find it very, very challenging that we would allow something, because honestly, the Dalles, we are only as good as what we allow to happen. So if we can stand up and, put the proper facilities in, the infrastructure, put the proper housing in that area, I think that it will not only make, the current neighborhood much more satisfied and feeling good and part of the town and situation, but it will also make us feel good about the people that we're bringing in, that we're keeping them safe and protecting them too. So that's all I have to say. I just hope that you guys make a smart, well-rounded decision, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Dodson. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask anybody that is phoned in. We can't see you raise your hand, but if you'd like to shout out, I don't know how else to put it, that you would like to speak over the phone to the city council at this public hearing. Laura Clement, would you like to speak?
Yeah, hi. I just kind of joined on this impromptu, but I live at 6328 Cherry Heights Road. So I'm out of town a little ways, but I used to live in town. And speaking from someone who is interested in creating a smart development on a high density residential piece of land in town, this whole conversation has been concerning to me, especially for someone who's interested in creating some really new energy efficient homes that are comfortable, healthy, safe, and durable for the people who are living in them. And I know that's some of the same values that Curtis Homes has as a builder. And I've been driving around town looking at different properties, and there's a lot of older housing there. I do energy efficiency consulting, and a lot of the homes in town could really stand to use some upgrades to make them more affordable for people. And so I see new construction as a great opportunity to have built-in energy savings for people to make homes not only more affordable up front, but also in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any phone calls? There we go.
Yes, here I am. My name is Denise Dietrich Vokum, and I live on 2735 East 12th. And just for the record, before my 5 minutes start, did want to say I should have been on the list because I did notify via email that I wanted to speak. But that's okay, I'm speaking now.
Okay,
Okay to go?
yes, it is. The clock has started.
In several letters by the public submitted in January, February this year, several people raised the issue of school overcrowding and notification. In the March 9th response, we were told this is not a criterion used in reviewing a subdivision application. Last week, Darcy Long Curtis asked the same question and received the same response. This is not a single duplex, but a large development. Notification of the school district should have been addressed early in this process. In Mr. Marash's letter dated March 9th, he asked if the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport and ODA, Oregon Department of Aviation, were notified about the application since the proposed development lies within the 10,000-foot approach surface of the runway. Issues and responses can be found in the May 21st meeting packet. Page 13 of 148 of Community Development Response states that this does not apply for several reasons, and then goes on to state, quote, appellants do not have standing to raise this argument because appellants do not have an interest in the hindrance of the use of the airspace, unquote. Attorney Marash's rebuttal, page 17 of 162, states, among other objections, quote, it's unconscionable that staff would argue that airport safety is not one of the purposes of the city's regulations of development surrounding airports, or that those who live in the flight path of an airport have no standing to raise an issue of airport safety, unquote. Subsequently, Community Development notified the airport and ODA. Seth Thompson of the ODA confirmed the proposed development is within the 10,000-foot approach surface and notification is required. On May 19th, Seth requested appropriate materials be submitted to him for review. Materials were sent, and on June 5th, Seth notified Josh Chandler that proposed structures must undergo an FAA Form 7460-1 aeronautical study by the ODA. Quote, all completed FAA Form 7460-1 documents must be submitted to the ODA by the applicant prior to approval of building permits, unquote. The ODA will clearly not deny the application, as airports in cities fly over densely populated areas, and the city code lists applicable regulations and restrictions. However, we do not know if this would have been picked up by Community Development in their zeal to approve this subdivision. If this had been overlooked and a crash occurred sometime in the future, both the city and the airport would have faced serious consequences. There are no ADUs in this neighborhood, and we have serious concerns about no parking spaces, as well as having coverage on the plots on which they are located, both detached and attached to single-family dwellings. It's difficult to determine from the concept drawings if there is greater than 60% coverage, hence the need for dimensional drawings. Page 33 of the May 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission minutes contains a presentation titled Financing ADUs. Comps and loans are noted as problems, and the last item states, quote, ADU does not increase the property's value. It usually limits the value due to a diminished livability due to overcrowding and diminished marketplace for possible buyers. With the issues raised within this meeting, why would ADUs even be considered, much less promoted and approved for new development? Since this block was rezoned, the city has had 22 or more years to prepare the infrastructure needed for future development, yet nothing has occurred. One of my concerns is that development will be approved, problems will occur, but no improvements will happen. Topography of this neighborhood make improvements to intersections, widening roads, and creating drainage a challenge. Drainage does not exist on most of 10th and 12th. Both our property and neighbor properties on the north side of the road suffer from runoff. There are blind hills with limited visibility, and speed limits are rarely observed. The 2017 TSP lists a sidewalk on 12th Street as a low priority at a cost to the city of a mere $170,000. There are definitely some discrepancies in the cost for this. This area is unique as residential.
Ms. Bokum, you have 30 seconds, okay?
Yes. Okay, as residential and agriculture both coexist quite nicely. People walk with them without dogs, ride and walk horses and other livestock. We have bike riders, agricultural traffic, in addition to residential and commuter traffic. Zoning, planning, and development are more than reviewing and labeling squares and rectangles on a map. We, the current and future tax-paying residents, will have to live with whatever decision is made tonight. It is the obligation of City Council and city departments to be careful, purposeful, and thorough in their decision-making on future development, which will forever change the character of this rural, well-established neighborhood. Thank you for your time and for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I'm looking at the board. Anybody else that would like to address the city council? I see anybody? Okay. I don't see anybody. Last call. Okay, thank you all very much for your testimony.
Got his hand up. Tanner's got his hand up.
Okay, we have Tanner Elliott.
Hi, I live at 397 Summit Ridge Drive. One question that I want to bring up is in the October City Council amendment, how many city councilors actually thought that the zoning change that was being discussed pertained to high density? How many of them thought that it was really only for larger parcels that wanted to do a minor partition or maybe add an ADU, not a heavily overburdened on every infrastructure, large, high development?
Just to clarify, the property was not rezoned in October. It was rezoned at least 1994 or before.
I'm talking about the October change to the code.
Oh, okay. The compatibility issue.
Correct.
Anybody want to respond to that?
I didn't realize it was taken out. In fact, I brought that up last week by reading parts of the comprehensive plan, which referred to compatibility, and was told it was not there. So
I thought it pertained to partition.
I think that addresses it right in that whole statement. You know, that it's creating such a huge safety factor. So I think most people, including Councilor Runyon and Miller, maybe you guys were thinking that it was really pertaining to minor partitions and in the low and medium density scenarios rather than these rather large high density projects. So
Councilor McLaughlin shares with that as well.
Okay.
I appreciate the point of clarification.
Anything else, Mr. Elliott?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Last call.
There's a waving hand, but some Murray's
Where?
in the middle, the Murray's.
You've already spoke. Yeah.
Yeah, they've already.
Okay, we're going to proceed with the next part of the public hearing, and that is to hear from the applicant in response to anything he has heard, or you have 5 minutes, Mr. Housley?
Yeah, I'm just getting off mute here. Okay. Yeah, first I just want to touch on our closing here, and I'll answer any questions that had arisen. But again, in our letter, we provided from HPR, a leading civil engineering firm, demonstrating how we're extending stormwater and sanitary sewer up to the property. There is extra capacity in that to serve neighboring properties that can hook up. As for the federal takings law issue raised by Mr. Marash and his clients, again, the opponents continually are arguing about Dolan, but staff and planning commission were correct in that it did not apply to the approval of this. It would have only been applicable had the city demanded extensive offsite improvements beyond the voluntary stuff for stormwater and sanitary, which we're volunteering. Opponents have demanded substantial offsite improvements for the sidewalk, but they've not done their homework. They've not done their cost estimates to support their claim. They could have easily done so. There's simply nothing in the record to support the demand for these improvements. Rather, opponents continue to admit that their preference for this is denial based on non-objective criteria. If a denial occurs, Kuntz is the controlling case, and the city cannot deny this application merely because the developer refuses to do these voluntary offsite improvements. Moving to the state's needed housing statute, the city can only apply clear and objective clear and objective standards to code provisions and discretionary code provisions for offsite improvements that are not clear and objective would be violative of ORS 197.3074 and 227.173.2. If council denies this application at LUBA, the city would have the burden of proof to demonstrate that the city code and conditions can only be applied in a clear and objective manner. We understand that it's very hard for folks when a quiet neighborhood is getting redeveloped to fulfill the zoning and comp plan requirements. We have volunteered extra infrastructure so they can hook up at a huge discount and a huge benefit to the city. This may not satisfy them, but the city cannot demand more from a housing developer, even if it feels like the right thing to do. The city is served by conscientious professionals such as Mr. Chandler, Mr. Anderson, and it would be well suited to follow their wise guidance in this. Everyone knows that the city needs housing. The land is planned for it. It is zoned for that. Our client is ready and able and wants to build it and provide the city of the Dalles much needed housing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marash, do you have anything you want to say, understanding that you would have 5 minutes and that Mr. Housley would have the chance to respond because he gets the last word?
Sure. I'll lean back again so you can see me. I'll just reiterate a couple key points here. The first one is, it's not the neighbor's obligation to design the project for the applicant or to provide detailed safety analysis of the sidewalk issue or the infrastructure issue. That's the applicant's burden. And we don't believe that they've met that burden here, and therefore we're recommending denial. The Coons case, I think, doesn't apply here because the applicant hasn't satisfied the basic standards for approval for safety, and they haven't provided the evidence necessary for you to determine those criteria are met. And then finally, on this clear and objective standard in state law that's been discussed, that law was adopted to stop jurisdictions from adopting things like design review and maybe these compatibility standards that were discussed earlier. Those are the sorts of things that law is aimed at. That law doesn't prevent you from enforcing basic public safety. There's never been a LUBA case that has held that law can stop you from enforcing basic public safety. And the code provisions at issue here are cited in my August 21 letter, actually quoted, and we went through them last hearing. And I'm just gonna go through one of the sections. There's several, but because it's been a long hearing, I'm not gonna go through each one. But I wanna go through at least one and explain why it seems pretty clear and objective to me. Section 1010.040B states, safe and convenient pedestrian facilities that strive to minimize travel distance to the greatest extent practicable shall be provided in conjunction with new development within and between new subdivisions, planned developments, commercial developments, industrial areas, residential areas, and neighborhood activity centers such as schools and parks. That seems pretty clear and objective to me. And so I don't think that there's a state law violation with that section. Not only that, but there are other state law provisions that require you to provide in your code for safe and convenient pedestrian connections. So we see this state law clear and objective standard as being sort of a red herring here because it doesn't apply to the arguments that we're making. Certainly not the requirement of this code section. I believe this requires them to have sidewalks between their neighborhood, their new development, and the activity centers such as school and parks. And there was testimony in the record in the email cited in my letter about a school-age child having to walk in the drainage ditch and falling and getting a concussion and being afraid to walk to school. And this new development, while it's not creating the situation, it's going to aggravate it significantly because 80 new dwellings, that's a lot more new pedestrians that are going to be walking on these areas. And it's also a lot more new traffic. Now they said, well, we used the traffic number for single family dwellings. We've got a lot of ADUs, so we've overestimated the traffic. That's one of the things that's in Mr. Housley's letter that it was submitted today. Well, there's only 11 or 12 or something ADUs. There's still like 69 new dwellings. And so, I mean, that is a lot of traffic. We submitted the ITE manual page that shows that it's an average of like 9.44 average daily trips generated by each single family dwelling. So there's going to be a lot of new traffic causing safety issues both on the sidewalks and at the intersection of 197th, which we also don't believe is a problem under state law. Obviously, you can require applicants for subdivisions to do traffic studies, and those studies need to be adequate. We don't think this one is, based on the reasons that our engineer put in his memo in the record. So at this point, we'd recommend denial of the application. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Marash? Mr. Housley, would you like to respond? You have the last word.
Yes, I would. First of all, let me take the transportation aspect of it. ODOT, the City of the Dalles, and the applicant's traffic engineer all demonstrated that this project can meet the safety warrants. We went and discovered this week that the city and ODOT have been actively working through the ARTS program to do many of the improvements that were requested by the appellants. So we feel that adequately addresses that. There also is traffic SDCs that the city could use to amplify those projects and make additional improvements should they see fit there. Again, this comes back down again to criteria that the appellants would like our client to build sidewalk gap after sidewalk gap after sidewalk gap. That does not meet the clear and objective standards. It does not meet any sort of voluntary contribution standard that can be required of our project, given what we're already doing here. Again, our project is doing the sidewalk improvements and frontage improvements along its frontage. That's all it can be legally required to do. We cannot be compelled to fix pre-existing conditions. That would be patently unfair and penalize people that did not create the problem to begin with. So we vehemently disagree with Mr. Marash and his appeal here. And we hope that City Council denies the appeal, affirms the decision of the Planning Commission and of the staff, and approves the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody on the City Council have any objection to closing the public hearing at this point? Is there anything else that you think you'd like to ask or before we close it?
We would still be able to ask staff.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm now closing the public hearing. I want everyone to know that over the weekend, I called each city council member and let them know that as far as I was concerned, as the one who was presiding over this hearing, that they would have the option of deferring any comment or questions until they've heard further arguments or testimony or questions from other city council members. So we're going to start on your far left and go in order. And we will, as I said, give council members can either defer comment until later in the hearing, or excuse me, later in the meeting, or they can speak. So we'll start on the far left with Councilor Miller.
I'd like to defer at this time.
Okay, Councilor Miller would like to defer her comments until later. Next is Councilor Rod Runyon.
I have a clarification question if Josh Chandler is still there for us. I asked last week about a minimum and got a number of 58 homes tonight. I was given 7 per acre, and that was going to be looked up, and I'm hoping you have. My math shows 7 times 6.92 acres is a minimum in high density of 48.44 homes. Do you have the same number or a better clarification?
I have a better clarification for you. When calculating, we calculate gross acreage. Gross acreage is calculated by going halfway into the right of way. So you would have to calculate all the right of way into it that surrounds it. That first number, I just crunched some numbers some more using our GIS system. The first number looked like it was more of an average, and it actually came out to 55.58, so 55. So we were off 3 units. So the correct answer is 55.
And when you say that, you're assuming per unit. So a triplex has 3 housing units, a duplex has 2, a solo home has 1.
Well, yeah, and we're not calculating any triplexes in this conversation. This is all based off of density calculations. So units, yeah, a triplex would be 3. If a triplex was proposed, then that would be counted as 3.
Thank you.
Yep.
I will have more, but that'll do it for now.
Okay, Councilor Randall.
I will defer at this time.
Okay, Councilor Randall has deferred comment until later. Councilor Long Curtis.
I do have a couple questions and then I'll come back to it later. So what is the estimated timeline for the development? Obviously, not all of these housing units are going in at the same time. How quickly do we think people will be added?
Mr. Housley?
Can I defer that to Mr. Curtis?
Certainly. Mr. Curtis, can you answer Councilor Long Curtis's question?
Yeah, good evening, Council and Mayor Mays. Thanks for the time to be here. We are in the process of working through the timeline. A lot of the reasons, that the community is asking questions for pricing and we're not able to definitively give that answer at this time is because we don't know exactly what the timing is because we're in the middle of this process as we speak. But our desire was to be able to do it in phases and to see how well the phases were received. We would expedite that process. I would estimate that we would do probably 3 phases is what we looked at, and we would probably do a phase a year or a phase every year and a half. If we were really being well received, then we would expedite that. Park Place has been exceeding expectations, and we're going much quicker than we expected on Park Place, and we assume the same thing here.
Can I just follow up on that? So I guess what I'm trying to ask you is with the typical crew that you use, do you anticipate 1 housing unit, I'll just say house for simplicity, at a time, 3 at a time, 5 at a time?
Well, we work off of a process where we've established kind of a pre-sold home process, and we like to work with our customers. We start homes before we typically have customers as well to help show what the product is going to look like. But then we allow the market and the product or the customers to be able to walk through that process with us. And so I would estimate, much like we've done at Park Place, that we'll start, a section probably somewhere between 5 and 6 or 7 at a time. And then as they're received, we'll continue to go. We try to have a foundation going as we speak.
Thank you. And so my other question, I guess, is to city councilors, and I don't know that it needs an answer right now, but just something I've been thinking about. We've been hearing about the safety problems on 10th and 12th Street. It's been a problem for a long time, even when I lived there. And I'm just wondering, now that we know that there is interest in developing that area, regardless of the decision that we make on this issue, perhaps we need to consider putting in some safety measures, sidewalks, et cetera, up in that area. And that's all for now.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McLaughlin.
As many of you know, I've been in this area 46 years, 40 of those years an educator in the schools. My concern is the impact that this development will have on schools. And when we didn't include them in any of the planning and any of the procedures that happened along the way, why did that happen? And I only briefly heard something about that. What's the answer to that question? Why did we not include Northwest Wasco schools in this decision? or in the planning?
That's probably a question for the staff. Is that, because you're talking about the meetings that the staff has and with,
Like they were excluded, it just, they weren't included.
right.
And it's going to be a major impact, especially on realigning the schools and the populations that attend. It will create more hardships for our schools, and they don't need more hardships.
Mr. Chandler, can you address why the school district wasn't in on the initial planning along with the utility companies and the fire district, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, following the notice of an application for the municipal code, the notice of application has to be provided to any affected government agency, department, or public district within whose boundaries the subject property lies. So that's the basic definition in our code. That's what essentially creates the notice of administrative application that we have. It started out as an administrative application. The same can be said for a quasi judicial application. It's just, it goes from a 100-foot radius to a 300-foot radius for quasi judicial.
Thank you. Did you have anything else, Counselor?
Still didn't
answer.
That didn't answer the question because the school district is an agency and it is affected and it just wasn't included, as I understand. Is that true? That Northwest or North Wasco County schools were not a part of the planning procedure?
They were not noticed, correct. And that's what the definition said, that I don't, do you want me to repeat it? It says whose boundaries the subject property lies. So they were not included because their boundary is not within the 100-foot buffer of the original notice. If we would like to change that and add the school district in, that may be something that city council could take a look at in the future.
I agree with that.
Counselor McLaughlin, did you?
I'll defer.
Okay. Mr. Chandler, aren't these meetings intended to deal with infrastructure issues that the development would impact? And that's maybe the school district that doesn't deal with infrastructure issues. And is there anything to that?
Yeah, site team is an infrastructure based process. We look at, really the built project, what it's going to take. And that's what provided the developer that, Legacy Development, that's what provided them with the information that they use to present the proposal that they have in front of us.
Thank you. Well, I believe everybody would like to speak later and it's gotten around to me. So I have some comments I would like to make. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for their professional presentation of this application. This is a very complicated issue. If people can see, this is the packet. There's about 500 pages in it. And it's been a real challenge to go through it and try to determine what is applicable criteria and what is not, and what is important of the issues. But I would like to compliment the city staff on the way this has been presented. I'd also like to compliment the applicant and the developer. We appreciate your interest in the city of the Dalles. And I, for one, believe that we do need some housing development such as this in the Dalles for the future of our community. I'd like to compliment the appellant, Mr. Marash, for the professional way you've handled situations, and also the citizens for indulging through what I believe were 4 plan commission meetings and now 2 city council meetings. Notwithstanding the fact that we need housing, there are several issues for me that I would like to address. And it's always a problem when you have public sentiment in this regard. The public sentiment on this particular subdivision is running probably 100 to 1. Many people are against it. Unfortunately, with a quasi-judicial hearing, popularity is not a valid or an appropriate reason for upholding an appeal, nor should it be. The second and third issues are issues that I brought up at the last council meeting and result to my questions and during my ex parte disclosures. And that have to do with the zoning, and hence related to the zoning, the compatibility of the subdivision with the surrounding area. This plat is surrounded on 3 sides by single family homes and on 1 side by an orchard. On the east side, one of the neighbors is actually an alpaca farm. I have questions about why this property was zoned multifamily more than 26 years ago. But the fact is that the issue of the zoning was not raised by the appellant, and therefore that and the issue of compatibility are not valid or appropriate reasons to uphold the appeal. My next issue has to do with the alleys and the park to be owned and maintained by a homeowners association. I have no doubts that when these units sell, residents will organize into a homeowners association and make sure that the alleys and the parks are maintained properly. But in my experience, that may not be the case 20 years from now. Private alleys and parks may deteriorate. Future homeowner association boards will be reluctant to raise fees. Homeowner fees may not cover the cost of upkeep. And if and when that happens, the developer, with all due respect, will be long gone. Residents will call on the city to take over the parks and the alleys. As someone whose undergraduate degree is in recreation and park administration, I have a natural resistance to parks that are not public parks. However, notwithstanding all that, concerns about homeowners associations and about private alleys and parks are not a valid or appropriate reason to uphold an appeal. Finally, we get to my final concern about this subdivision. And unlike public sentiment, zoning, compatibility, and homeowner association ownership, this is a valid criteria. Talking about the issue of public safety, I have two issues regarding the criteria. But first, I'd like to give you some context about where I'm coming from. I live on the east side of Highway 197 in Columbia View Heights. Our daughter and her two children, my two grandchildren, live near Dry Hollow School. So I pass through the intersection of 197 and Fremont, and I travel up Richmond and down 10th and 12th Streets a lot, especially lately. Like Mr. Stice, I have walked that area many times. At first, I wasn't all that concerned about 197 in Fremont, but when I realized that people living in the Grove would be using that intersection to access Interstate 84, I became more concerned about adding additional cars to an already tenuous situation where you have cars accessing and crossing 197 with 60-mile-an-hour traffic. But my concern about that intersection pales in comparison to the concern I have regarding Richmond, 10th, and 12th Streets. As has been mentioned many times today, I agree these streets are narrow with no sidewalks and each have several blind hills. The subdivision will have an estimated 238 new people, more than 100 new cars, and 82 additional peak hour trips. I think adding these people and the automobiles to an already tenuous situation on 10th and 12th and Richmond is a recipe for disaster. In the material presented in our packet, the appellant asserted that the need for the off-site sidewalks are driven, and I quote, primarily, end quote, by this application. Mr. Housley disagreed. I asked Mr. Housley if he would concede that the subdivision significantly contributes to the situation. He said no. I then asked if it contributed moderately to this dangerous situation, and he said no. And I said, would you be willing to concede that it contributes at all? And he said no. With all due respect, I disagree with that. By virtue of the fact that there will be 238 additional people, 100 additional cars, 82 trips, and during the peak hour, I feel this application and this subdivision will contribute significantly to an already existing situation. It looks like unless somebody abstains, that I will not have a vote, but if I did, I would vote to uphold the appeal. With that, I will now turn to the order I was in before with Councilor Miller.
As I mentioned earlier, I have spoken to 3 truck drivers that use 197. And that intersection, one of the truck drivers, he goes through that intersection up the hill twice a day, 5 days a week. He comes down the hill twice a day, 5 days a week. He considers the intersection of Fremont, 197 and Columbia View Drive unsafe. 2 other truck drivers believe that it is dangerous. And one of the drivers was saying that he has seen trucks that were trying to move or trying to turn to go up Fremont because cars were waiting there to go onto 197. The truck was cutting it short and his trailer, and we're talking semis, 18 wheelers. And this trailer is going off into the ditch, and more several times. It takes a tow truck to pull that trailer out. And at that time, it is blocking traffic uphill and downhill. He also mentioned to me that seeing skid marks coming down the hill because the truck had to put on his brakes because somebody from Columbia View Drive thought that they could make it across the hill or across the freeway and up the hill or down. So I'm in support of most everything that Steve Hudson said regarding Highway 197, Fremont Drive, and Columbia View Drive. And it is, in my opinion, a safety issue. It isn't only a safety issue for that intersection, it's a safety issue for Old Duffer Road and Richmond, and for Thompson, Old Duffer Road, and 10th Street. And I also think that it's kind of laxed in not notifying the school district because development of this size is going to have a lot of school-age children, and that the schools should have been part of this. And if the fire department wasn't part of this, they should have been.
Thank you. Councilor Runyon.
I'm going to go back over a couple of things that I brought up. Again, last week I did bring up compatibility, and I thank former Councilman Tanner Elliott, who I've not spoken to about this project at all, for filling in the gap. I was trying to figure out where did I miss. That was in my first year on the city council, and I'm going, I don't remember taking that out, compatibility out of everything. Well, maybe I missed something. I've been doing this for the public between 8 years with the port, 8 years with the county, and now 2 years with the city. And I'm just sitting here at a loss how that got taken out of everything, and I missed that. And for that, I apologize. And if we can't use that environmental compatibility, all the things that were in the 2011 comprehensive plan through numerous citizen meetings, to put all that together and not have it count, I just do not get that part. But if we can't use it, we can't use it. However, we can use safety. And I'm very familiar with that area. I've known the Geiger family for many, many years and others along that road. How we could have something, even though it was zoned way back in 1994 or 96, we keep hearing different numbers, how that could have been left alone and the city not worked on infrastructure to that area that they zoned so highly. I would imagine it was done, the zoning was done because at the time the state of Oregon was trying to push small communities into larger density. I served on the planning commission for the city. I'm not sure the exact years, but I know it was in the mid 90s, and infill was the big thing at that time. And that had to do with putting manufactured homes in the middle of housing neighborhoods, which I never understood. And we tried to make sure all the front doors faced the same way as the houses. But as we all know, that didn't occur. But the big item here is safety. Those streets that lead to this project, no matter which way you go and up and down the hill, Richmond is absolutely a nightmare in the wintertime, and kids going to school, et cetera. I think safety has not been addressed on a thorough and comprehensive level. And when my heart aches on something, I just know that I need to listen to it. And safety is the big, big item. I'm also concerned about the airport. I'm not a pilot or anything, but as I continue to read that information, and I appreciate those comments tonight, which were much more thorough than the reading I had done. But safety is a big issue, a huge issue for 10th and 12th and Richmond, and getting out of that development with that many possible cars. And that's where I'm at. I'm having a real struggle here of going with the previous approval of this development based on the safety issue alone.
Thank you. Councilor Randall.
Yeah, we're at a moment that has been 30 or 40 years in the making. There's decisions that some of us may have been involved with, others that we weren't even around at that time, kind of out of our control. So here we are at this moment. And I agree, it kind of snuck up on us, and safety is the big issue, I think. And we'd be remiss to ignore the pleas of the citizens and their concerns about safety.
Thank you. Councilor Lon Curtis.
Yeah, so I really struggle with this because I think just looking at it, I don't know that I'm not sure that we have the right to deny, the project to go forward, because they did meet what is in code and we put it there, and there was a lot of effort and people put work into it over many years, and it's been sitting there. I can understand why we may not have developed out 10th and 12th Street. I'd say it's because the city has limited resources. We didn't see any indication that that was going to be the next area of big development. But now we know that it is an area that a developer has interest in, and it is zoned high density and has been. We also know that with some of the rulings with the Gorge Commission lately, we're not going to have a lot of options on where we're going to go as a community. And when we're making decisions, we have to think about not just 20 years, which is what the state requires, but now we've got to think about forever for the Dalles and what that looks like. I think we do need to fix the safety out there, but I think that that is on the city. And I think that is something we should be looking at. We have a terrible problem with a lack of affordable housing, and people cannot afford to work here. The people that we know now from COVID-19 are essential, our grocery workers, even our teachers. They don't have a place to go. They don't have a place to live. They can't afford even a 2-bedroom apartment. It's outrageous. And just, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of intolerance for low-income people. And I just want to point out that the definition at the state of low income is less than 80% of the area median income. And in Wasco County, our median income is only $50,000, basically $51,000. So you qualify as low income if you make less than $40,000 a year. You would consider yourself moderate income if you are somewhere between that 80% and 120% of median income, which means you could make up to $61,401 and still be considered median income. Ask yourself, can a single parent afford the housing options that we have right now? Have you tried getting an apartment? The wait lists are very long. We have to do something. We don't like some of the issues with this current development, but I think we painted ourselves into a corner here, because when it came up that the neighbors had concerns, we didn't create a forum where everybody could talk about it. We didn't give the developer an opportunity to maybe address some of those things and for the community to talk about the options and what we might do in the future. We didn't sit down and say, okay, it's an issue out here on 10th and 12th, but then what's our option? Where are we going to build next time? And look at the map and look at the other high density areas and look like I did when I came on city council and realized there aren't very many spaces that are big enough left in the Dalles to build high density. And so every time we do something where we don't build high density, we're making a decision for our future. We're limiting ourselves, and we need to be careful. I am very concerned that the school district wasn't involved, but I don't think it was statutorily required. And so I think the planning department had the citizens' best interest at heart. I personally found it very hard to maintain a sense of open-mindedness when I read the letters against. They were very personal, very much attacking council, attacking staff, accusing us of horrible things that is, I don't believe is true of anyone. Accusing us of being money hungry. There's no money in this for us. We got dinner, we got a sandwich. So I have concerns, but we need more. And so we've got to figure out a way to work this out. not a straight up or a straight down, but we've got to come together as a community and figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor McLaughlin?
Well, this is a complex issue. Just looking at the amount of documentation that we read, with intended and unintended consequences that will have a far-reaching impact on the future of our city. I have carefully reviewed all correspondence and all supporting documentation to this appeal, number 030-20 sub 74-19 Legacy Development Group LLC, and am persuaded to rule in favor of the appellant. I vote to approve the appeal and send back to planning to address stormwater removal, pedestrian and traffic safety issues, and infrastructure improvement that the city will bear. And I also agree with you that we also have a responsibility to go back and look at this area, which over the years with limited resources, and my concern with COVID and the loss of resources coming in currently, what commitments can we make in the future with not knowing what kind of resources we do have available and how that will affect our city. So I am still in favor of approving this appeal.
Could you repeat your motion or it's not your request, I guess is the best way to put it. You go back to the Plan Commission and address what?
Well, are we to the point of making a motion or are we just in a discussion?
We could be, but I thought that your request to go back to the Plan Commission was sort of a prelude to a motion.
Approve and maybe to send back to planning to address these issues if it's denied. I don't know.
But what are the issues? Stormwater?
Stormwater removal. This is what I picked up over all of this testimony. Pedestrian and traffic safety issues or lack of planning therein, and infrastructure improvements that will initially cost the city untold amounts of money.
I get, what is it that you would like the Plan Commission to look at the, going through what they did, but they went through 4 meetings, and are you asking them to?
Well, no,
ask,
I'll rescind on that then. I'm just going to vote to approve the appeal and let it.
Okay. Is Mr. Parsons? Yeah.
Yes.
It's our attorney. Mr. Parsons is the attorney representing the city tonight. Can you give us a little guidance? It seems that there's some real concerns about the safety issue. So the issue with the schools, is that in your opinion, a valid criteria by which the city council can uphold the appeal?
So no to the school question. It's not an applicable criterion. And regarding the notice question, I would defer to staff regarding whether or not they were within the notice area or not. If staff did that analysis and determined the school is outside the district boundary and outside of the notice area, then that would be determinative as to the notice issue. Regarding the issues that I've heard being raised, largely are safety issues. Some and in particular pedestrian and safety issues, questions of stormwater and costs of infrastructure improvements. What my direction to the council would be this evening would be to take those issues and tie them back to specific criteria in the code if the council is looking for them to be a basis or bases for denial, and not just the general terms, stormwater, pedestrian safety issues, or I heard in some of the testimony discussion of a safety plan. I think that the way that the code is applied is that it is the safety plan. The criteria in the code work as the plan. So if you're going to make a
motion to deny, it should be based on findings addressing specific code criteria.
Section 10 of the municipal code deals with street improvements and sidewalk improvements. Would you consider that to be applicable grounds for an appeal on the safety issue, the requirements of the city as it regards to streets and sidewalks?
Yeah, so the mayor, Mr. Mayor is referring to section 1010.040, which are pedestrian requirements, and 1010.060 street requirements. And yes, those are applicable, but you would have to delve into those a little bit and look and see what standards within those subsections would be basis for denying the application.
I believe that it was addressed in the appellant's arguments, the specific section of the code and the reasoning and the arguments for upholding the appeal based on those sections of the code.
Yeah, it is. What I'm advising is to, so it raises the question, the clear and objective question for the needed housing statutes. And what I am advising the council is to take a conservative approach regarding that, instead of just stating that it's denials based on lack of safety analysis, is to point to one or more of the standards in those sections and say that the applicant, the staff report and the application have not adequately addressed them.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could add one more thing. Again, the reason for doing that is twofold. One, it's kind of a belt and suspenders approach to establishing any basis for denial. And then two, it's building a record to defend against any claim at LUBA that a denial isn't based on clear and objective criteria, but it's based on discretionary standards. And discretionary standards, I think of in terms of something where opinions can differ more than whether or not a hard standard is either satisfied with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, yes or no.
Okay. Somewhere in our 500 pages, I have a copy of section 10, and it would probably take me 15 minutes to find it. Does anybody have?
No.
I got it.
You want me to make copies?
It's all right.
Oh.
That's out of Attorney Marash's.
Yeah, I know. You're going to have to find it again because well, before we go any further, okay, thank you. Thank you, Darcy.
Hey, Darcy.
I don't want to travel down a road that isn't going to get us anywhere. Not to put words in people's mouths, I took at least 3 members of the council stated that they felt that safety was a primary problem with the application, and I got the impression that they would vote against the application and for the appeal. And if that is the case, then I would say that our next step would be to identify sections of section 10.060 and 040, cite some specific sections of this to argue the safety portion of the argument. Am I headed in the right direction, Mr. Parsons?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking for, Mr. Mayor. And to be clear, once those sections are identified upon which the council is saying criterion or criteria haven't been satisfied, staff would be able to prepare appropriate findings addressing that at the time that an order was brought back for council review and approval.
Okay. Is my assumption correct that there seems to be some real concerns on the part of at least 3 of you about the safety issue?
Yes.
Safety for me.
Safety and the ADA, which is part of that as well, 10.6.060.030.
I have a
With
question.
Disabilities Act.
Counselor?
Yeah, question for Josh Chandler. So there's 2 phases of this approval process, right? So I'm curious, Josh, if the safety concerns are designed to be met in phase 2, or they have to be met in phase 1.
Safety concerns, specifics to that by chance? Do you
Yeah, I'm
have-
sorry, sidewalks, ADA, things that were brought up by the 3 counselors with concerns.
So the requirements of the sidewalks are required at this stage. Sidewalks all the way around the development. The inspection of ADA standards, that would be something that would have to be determined once an engineered set of plans are submitted. So those would be at the second stage. But sidewalks, it's essentially sidewalks cannot be how we tell developers or any builder around here, if a sidewalk or drive approach or anything is approved not to ADA standards, they are required to rip it up and install it and do it till it's up to standard.
So, okay. So my comments, I guess, to council then is, I don't see how we could expect the developer to put in sidewalks and pay for that all the way down 10th and 12th. I think that's on city council. If we as a city want our high density development, we're going to have to step up for that. I feel like despite some of the concerns that we have that that the appellants, they haven't proven and they haven't provided enough reason not to approve the plan. I feel like the Planning Commission did the right thing. It was the hard thing, but it is correct by the letter of the law.
Well, I think my issue, as I explained, is that I don't think it's incumbent on the developer to pay for sidewalks either. Off-site sidewalks. I certainly don't think it's up to the citizens or the residents to pay for it. But my point is that by adding 238 people, 100 cars, and 82 peak trips, that it's going to put a substantial increase in the dangerous circumstances that surround the area. I think the developer might not have caused this, but the subdivision will contribute substantially to the safety of the area.
And I agree with that.
I agree.
Counselor?
So does that mean that you don't think there's any way to add more high density development up there in that area because we have no options to make those areas safe?
I'm saying that at a minimum, I would be looking for something that is a lot less dense than 80 units that would virtually almost double the traffic in the area.
Right now, it has to do with the site plan. If there were less, development would still be high density.
True. I still have safety concerns as well, but I'm not sure that it would be any more or less safe by the number. I don't believe it's 9 some trips per person or per unit a day. I think that's way too high. I don't make that many trips. And the thing is, I don't want to sit here and speculate because I'm not a professional. We have a professional engineer. We had professional traffic studies done. Our professionals did their work. They did what we pay them to do, and I don't like it, and I wish it was different. But they have said that it does meet the safety standards, and we know that we can take steps to make it even safer than it would be without those steps. But I don't think that we can deny the application. They did what we said we wanted when we said we wanted high density there, and they did what was in our code.
I don't fault the staff at all.
At all.
Yeah, I think they were doing their job, and I think they recognize the fact that we need multifamily housing. And I also agree with you that those original numbers that you just cited they sound really bizarrely high to me. But I'll get back to the numbers that I was citing with the number of people, the number of cars, and the number of peak hour trips is contributing substantially to an already existing dangerous situation. Anybody else?
I'm just thinking that, yes, we followed the letter of the law, and that's the ordinance, and we're following all the criteria, but we don't enter the human element and taking in account for the city and the citizens surrounding and the interest of all of the city. And also the increased burden that it will place on resources and infrastructure and the increased traffic. I'm concerned on 197 and addressing that, and not knowing what the timeline, not knowing what, there's multiple agencies that would have input on that development in order to have that up to a standard where it doesn't create more problems for that side of the town. So I think we have to sometimes sit back and be reasonable and being human in some of the decisions, and also include that in our decision-making process.
Whatever happened to common sense?
Reason, we're reasoning things out. Yes, we all know we need more housing. We all know that we need more affordable housing. We know all of those things, but yet going to the next step and going to the extreme, is that the answer? I don't think so. I think we need to step back and try to find some neutral ground, something that we can find that we can work towards and plan for the future with the city and with some of the partnerships with developers so that we can all work towards that same goal. We want a better city. We don't want to create large volumes and just more problems for those areas and all the people that live in that area.
I also feel that we need affordable housing, quote unquote. We don't know if this housing development is going to be affordable. The developer cannot share with us what he expects to, sell the homes for. Again, I want to emphasize that's not really a criteria for us to uphold the appellant, but just an observation. Councilor Runyon.
Well, I would add again, I think the traffic analysis is sadly lacking and is incomplete, in my opinion, at this point, and that is one of the primary criteria. And that's what I'm going to have to hang my hat on, because I agree with Darcy as far as a number of the other things. They're there. I've been around legal issues a long time, but that issue right there with this particular neighborhood and compatibility, again, we can't use that for whatever reason. But the traffic safety analysis, in my opinion, is incomplete. We've gone from 80 homes down to 55 now, and I mean, right there, would the developer consider limiting the number that gets him over the edge of being high density housing, or does it have to be 69, which was the number we came to last week? I mean, we're just kind of all over the place. And my experience with planning departments over the years is that they're pretty exact on things, but we've jumped around on that number. And that just tells me the analysis needs a little more work. And not that they haven't worked their tails off on this thing. It's very complex, but I do believe more work needs to be done, but safety is the main criteria. Knowing those roads as I do, and I think we all do, and what's there now. And I understand the development will create the proper sewer lines and water lines for the development right there. But the traffic safety is a huge, huge impact. And that's where I'm stuck. If somebody can bend me from that, I'm willing to take a look at it. And I've said on a lot of hard issues over the years, but that one is really a stickler at this point for me.
And I started my statement by saying, this is a complex issue, and it is. And we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. And so I come back to reason and including a human element and listening to the citizens that live in our city. I know that we're bound to meet state regulations, state laws, and we are also, over the years, pressured by the state to meet new standards, which don't necessarily conform to the compatibility of the local community. And I use that term, and I know that's the elephant in the room, but it's an issue. To put something of that magnitude in a rural setting that was once a orchard, and we're taking agricultural land to push more residents out. And it's common in urban areas, but not so common in our area. And we're forced to it because of the urban growth boundary that we're confined to. And we're still going to have to find solutions. But I still think that we can come back and find some common ground.
I'd just like to say that it's not the staff's job to push this application. It's not their job to sell it. That's the applicant's job. The staff's job is to understand what the policy is of the city council, to implement that policy and comply with the wishes of the council as in a manner that they get direction from us. And I hesitate on asking the staff this question because I'm afraid of the answer, but hearing the majority of the council discuss safety issues as it pertains to Chapter 10, do you feel like you have sufficient understanding of our concerns, specifically applicable to Section 10?
Mr. Mayor, I'll jump in and respond first. What I've heard through the deliberations so far after making that request is at least some direction regarding compliance with 10.10.060A4 as pertains to the traffic, the transportation system plan and the traffic study. I have heard that. I have the larger concepts of connectivity, infrastructure improvements. I haven't heard anything tied back to specific criteria, but I have heard some deliberations pointing to that one specific criterion.
So to repeat, you're talking about Section 10.10.060A4.
Yes.
Okay.
And if there are additional criteria that the council feels aren't satisfied, it would be good to discuss them as well. Or even at the very least to give direction to staff to prepare some draft findings for the council to review and potentially approve or amend
as it relates to that particular section. Correct?
Yeah, at least that one. I think for that one, we have adequate direction. I'm asking if there are any other ones as well.
I also brought up section 10.6060.030 with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which again relates to safety in my view.
I'm going to look that up really quickly.
Where are you? Could you repeat that? The section?
10.6060.030.
10.6, okay.
Izetta, how difficult would it be for you to make a copy of mine so I could be looking at it? Thanks.
Yeah, one more. I'm reading off.
I'd also like to have some consideration paid to 10.10040, which is pedestrian requirements.
Yes.
We should pass this down to Darcy.
And the other one we have talked about, but we didn't mention the number, but it was 10.6.050.040 regarding substandard and unsafe due to grades and narrow roadways and documented, other things that go along with those intersections.
Does that last section deal with onsite or offsite?
These are off-site roads.
Okay.
Which are substandard and unsafe due to grades and narrow roadways.
I'm just thinking, the widths of the street in that area, do they comply with city requirements for width within the city limits? At one time, this was county property, and I believe Thompson Street, because we had the debate over paving or not paving those areas, and Thompson Street was the demarcation line, and anything beyond that was in the county. We have since, after the urban growth development, encompassed, and I think we came to some agreements. This was many years ago now. Well, you were in the county at that time.
Yep.
You remember?
So there's a joint agreement as far as development in that
Right.
area.
Thank you. So if we include, or if we annex that area, will the streets, 10th and 12th, will those comply with city standards for street width? I don't think so.
Is that a question you'd like to ask the staff? Yeah. Dave Anderson, did you hear the question from Councilor McLaughlin?
I did, Mayor, and thank you for asking. And I think this is a good opportunity to actually clarify. Those streets are narrow compared to some other streets, primarily because there isn't paved, there are no shoulders, this has been mentioned. There are no paved areas for on-street parking. However, the travel lanes are the standard width for local streets. They're 11 to 12 feet wide per lane. That's the normal width in a neighborhood residential street. So I appreciate the opportunity just to provide that clarification.
I think the citizens are concerned about not the width of the street, but the size for pedestrian walking, sidewalks. I remember storm ditches that run along there, if I'm not mistaken, and we've had some discussions over that, creating some flooding problems on that area.
I don't know anything about the flooding, but I do concur with the first part of what you said. Yeah.
I guess just if that was a question, Councilor McLaughlin, the development is putting in storm system for the development.
For this, yeah.
So
The development.
it's not anticipated to add in any flooding.
I'm considering the downward flow for the water, the storm water down. I think it's 12th on the left and right side both. I know I've seen, I don't know. I think that to me poses the problem, and pedestrian access for children and people walking along there, and along with the speed of the traffic that travels along that route. So I think that all contributes to the safety issue that remains unanswered. And that's what's causing the concern with moving forward on this project, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Parsons, What's that mean? I think we're trying to wrap things up here.
But you should say you want to continue.
What?
Say you want to continue because it's past 8:30.
It's 8:30 and I'd like to ask the city council if you'd like to postpone this hearing yet again, or whether you'd like to try to wrap this up tonight and give staff, including our attorney, sufficient direction to come back with something in regards to the safety issue at our next meeting.
Let's finish it up.
Yeah, but can we just take a 5-minute quickly?
Sure.
And
We're
then-
going to be taking a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 20 minutes to 9.
Oh, it's on your,
It's in the
okay,
Attorney Marash's
okay,
letter,
okay,
and it was page 63 of 368.
okay.
Hmm?
Sections?
Yeah, well, this was out of one of the attorney's letters. Where I found it quickly, where I could find it quickly. Yeah. They were kind of all
Ready, Izetta?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're reconvening, and I'd like to turn it over to Councilor Runyon.
Just to clarify, I brought up the ADA part, but I fully realize that would be part of phase 2 anyway, and not for, a decision-making process in this phase.
Councilor Randall.
Yeah, I think at this point, I would have to agree with Councilor Long Curtis that unless we can point to specific standards that have not been met, and that's my worry, is that we have to find something if we are going to deny it based on our safety concerns. We've followed the process, we've exposed weaknesses and inadequacies, but the process has been followed and criteria have been met.
Well, I would submit that the criteria has not been met pertaining to section 10.10040 and which is, I said sidewalks requirements, it's actually pedestrian requirements, and also 10.10060 street requirements. And it's been suggested that we can cite in the street requirements section 4 as being valid criteria for upholding the appeal.
The other one was 10.6050.040. That was the other one that was mentioned.
Yeah, but what section out of that? Did you? Okay.
Substandard and unsafe due to grades and narrow roadways.
Hmm.
So, I don't know that in any motion, we have to list every number. As I read the motion, we've listed them in our discussion. We have them in the minutes, and the motion itself gives us some latitude there for staff to put that together. So if you're
Let's
looking
get a
to,
point of clarification from legal.
Right.
yeah,
Mr. Parsons,
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. What I was requesting before the break was just some clarification for staff so that we had some marching orders going into drafting findings.
all right.
okay. And I would suggest that we have cited 2 or more sections of the municipal code that can be used as a basis for that. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now back to the staff. And again, I'm not trying to railroad anything here. We got 6 people here. I'm just trying to get us off dead center. Does the staff feel they can come back with sufficient criteria from those 2 sections of the municipal code concerning the pedestrian and the street requirements? Do you have enough direction to do that?
Can you repeat the sections again, please? I'm looking at them. I'm having a tough time, but
10.10.040 and section 10.10060. And specifically in regards to the 0.060 street requirements, specifically would be number 4 under approval criteria. I do not have a section for these pedestrian requirements. Maybe somebody else has, or maybe you guys could find one. But it's in there, I know, because
The other number we've mentioned several times is 10.6.050.040.
Say that again. Rod, can you repeat that?
10.10.0, I'm on the wrong one. 10.6.050.040B.
and what specifically from that?
Safety analysis that I thought is lacking.
Okay, so real quick, 10.10.060, number 4. So we're specifically talking about the traffic impact study. Is that correct? Because that's what that code is.
whoever brought that up.
Traffic safety, whichever one of those quickly applies.
It doesn't. That's why I'm trying to ask. That's the criteria right there that we're talking about is the traffic impact study. So criteria number 4, the approval criteria. If there's an issue with that approval criteria, I need to be directed on how to draft it.
Well, in my view, we're talking about unsafe due to grades and narrow roadways. And that's why I brought up that one that ends in .040B, which I think is direct for that particular area, and how it's laid out or not laid out.
The issue, as I tried to frame it, was the increased traffic is going to exacerbate the existing street network. And it was also cited by the appellant that's, and I don't have that, I'd have to go through the 500 pages to come up with that. It was cited by the appellant as being a criteria for upholding the appeal. And I believe he cited sections of both sections of the code regarding pedestrian requirements and street requirements.
Okay, I'm still hung up on this traffic impact study number 4 approval criteria. So how is the approval criteria for that not met? We're talking about the traffic impact study that was submitted. So is there an issue with the traffic impact study? Or are we talking about something completely different? Because then you start talking about grades. How are grades in this criteria?
Traffic impact study, I think, is incomplete.
It's incomplete. Okay, so then I'll create a finding on the incomplete traffic impact study, nothing to do with grades, because that's not part of this criteria.
There was a 1-hour traffic study, or maybe 2 hours at one location, and it really seems incomplete for the area we're talking about, which is a rural area without sidewalks, without a lot of the amenities that we have in the city.
Okay, so we do have standards for traffic impact studies, and I do know it followed it. So maybe we need to look at that in the future too.
I agree.
Exactly.
I agree with that. That doesn't help us now in this decision.
No.
Josh, again, I'm going to cite 10.10060. And sections 5A and 5B, okay?
Is that for A, 10.10.060A, 5A?
5A.
Yes.
A5A, because it's broken down between A, B, C, D, and then it's broken up even more, 5A.
It's A5A.
Okay,
It's A, yeah, it's A, 5A and B.
okay, yeah, I got notes.
Okay. How about 10.10040? Do you have enough on that? Do you have sufficient direction on section 10.10040?
A, B, C, D, and E?
No?
It's B and A.
B and A, okay.
No, not B. Where'd you get that?
Here.
It's the appellant side, section E.
This is their letter.
Okay. Josh, take a look at section E, okay, on that.
Okay. So cutting out B and A and just doing E.
No, Job, add E to B and A. Oh, we're in another section.
10.10.040.
Yeah, that's pedestrian requirements. The one I was talking about before was
10.10.060, A5A and A5B.
Right.
Yes.
And 10.10.040B dot 1 and 2 and A of that same section. I think we've done enough
Bouncing back
correction.
and, we're bouncing back and forth between the two and I'm confused.
we got to make sure we got this right. Let's deal with 10.10.040, pedestrian requirements.
Correct.
I would submit that section E is the applicable.
Under B,
E.
E under B.
No, under C.
You mean-
Well,
you mean-
no, it's E, section E.
Next page.
10.10.040, section E.
Oh, gotcha. Offsite.
That's
improvement-
pedestrian, under pedestrian requirements.
Offsite improvements. Okay. Gotcha.
So only E?
No, that's, yes, and that's the one I'm hanging my hat on. Okay, now 10 point, Josh, you with me?
I'm with you.
Spencer Parsons, are you with me?
I am, Mayor.
Okay, 10.10.060. Street requirements. Section, okay, here we go. 5,
Under A.
A5.
5A and B.
A5A?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
No.
A5A and A5B.
5A and A5B.
10.10.060, 5A and 5B.
But it's under A.
But it's under A.
Okay. Right. Okay,
Okay. It'll be
So,
a
I
group
mean-
effort, but I think we could probably put something together.
okay, I think that those two sections apply at least directly to what I was suggesting.
Yep.
Don't have a vote. Mr. Parsons, would you suggest the motion be made tonight directing the staff in this regard?
Well, yeah, I might recommend that the council entertain a motion to tentatively deny with direction to staff to produce an order and appropriate findings for council review and consideration, just because of the fact that it sounds like the decision's not unanimous.
Could you repeat the suggested motion, please?
A motion to tentatively deny with direction to staff to prepare an appropriate order with findings. And
Okay.
then after the motion's done, you'd want to continue the hearing to a date certain for consideration of that order and findings.
Okay, that's right here.
Okay, let's get the easy part done with first. It would be appropriate to decide this issue at our next city council meeting, which is September 14th, is that right? Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
That's 2 weeks from tonight, September 14th at 5:30. Does everybody understand the motion as Mr. Parsons has described it?
Yes.
Any questions or clarifications? Counselor Lon Curtis? I'm sorry, I thought you wanted to say something. No. Okay. Okay. I'm looking for a motion and a second, and then we'll have discussion.
I'll give it a shot. Move to tentatively uphold the appeal APL 031-020, reverse the planning commission's decision approving SUB 74-19, directing staff to prepare an appropriate order with findings consistent with the council's decision and continue the hearing to a date certain for a final adoption of the order, September 14th, 2020 at 5:30 PM.
And I will second.
Been moved by Counselor Runyon and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to proceed as described. Discussion. Counselor Long Curtis.
I believe that the criteria has been met. However, in the interest of not rushing things and giving everyone time to process, I will vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Discussion? Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Darcy Long Curtis,
Aye.
McLaughlin,
Aye.
Scott Randall,
Aye.
Rod Runyon,
Aye.
Linda Miller. Aye.
Motion carries. Is there any more business to come before the city council? Okay, thank you all for your indulgence. Thank you to the 88 people that are still on. Thank you for your indulgence. This has been a very difficult issue, as you can tell. It was difficult at the Plan Commission. I'm sure it was difficult for the staff, and it's been difficult for us too. I'm confident that we can proceed from here, and September 14th, you may want to tune in once more. And last call for anything else to come before the council. With that, I'm adjourning the meeting. Thank you all very much.